Oh, a new visitor from the woods. Welcome. Are you a lost wanderer, tired from a long journey? Then join me, sit beside the fireplace, and let me tell you some stories that may soothe your mood as you regain your strength. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also comment where you're watching from and what time it is. You all set? Good. Let's start the story with a journey into one of the most fascinating aspects of the wizarding world. Long before wizards wielded wands or witches brewed potions, magical creatures roamed the earth, their extraordinary abilities and mysterious natures a testament to the deep wells of magic that exist in our world. The field of magizoology, the study of magical creatures, stands as one of the oldest and most vital branches of magical knowledge, connecting witches and wizards to the natural world in ways that even the most talented Muggle naturalist could never comprehend. Imagine yourself walking through the ancient forests of medieval Europe, where early wizard naturalists first began documenting the behaviors of creatures now familiar to every student at Hogwarts. These pioneering magizoologists ventured into uncharted territories, often with little more than their wands and their wits, meticulously recording their observations on parchment that would later form the foundation of our understanding of magical creatures. The dawn of formalized magical creature studies is commonly attributed to Gulliver Poceby, who in the early 12th century established the first known sanctuary for injured magical creatures in the remote highlands of Scotland. Pokeby's groundbreaking work, The Sentient Spectrum, proposed the revolutionary idea that magical creatures possessed varying degrees of intelligence and should be categorized accordingly, a concept that would eventually evolve into the classification system we recognize today. As you sit by the warmth of this fire, perhaps you can feel the cool mist of those Scottish highlands, hear the distant calls of hippogriffs that found refuge in Pokeby's sanctuary, and appreciate how one wizard's compassion shaped centuries of magizoological practice. The true transformation of magical creature study from isolated observation to structured discipline came with the establishment of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures in 1362. This marked the wizarding world's first collective acknowledgement that these magnificent beings required not just study but protection, both for their own sake and for the safety of the wizarding community at large. Close your eyes and envision the ministry's early offices, lit by flickering candlelight, where serious-faced witches and wizards debated the proper handling of dragon populations and the territorial rights of merpeople. The decisions made in those chambers reverberate through history, shaping how we interact with magical creatures to this day. No discussion of magical creature care would be complete without acknowledging the towering contribution of Newt Scamander. As you warm your hands by our fire, picture a young Scamander, his weathered case in hand, traversing continents in the early 20th century. His revolutionary approach prioritized understanding creatures in their natural habitats rather than in captivity, observing their natural behaviors rather than their reactions to human intervention. Scamander's magnum opus, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, transformed magizoology from an esoteric field to a subject accessible to every witch and wizard. The worn copies found in countless homes and the dog-eared textbooks carried by generations of Hogwarts students stand as testament to his enduring legacy. Within those pages, creatures once feared came to be understood, and those once hunted came to be protected. The classification system we know today, rating magical creatures from X for boring to X, XX for known wizard killers, emerged from Scamander's work with the Ministry of Magic. This system acknowledges both the wonder and the danger that magical creatures represent, recognizing that respect must always accompany our curiosity. At Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the care of magical creatures has been taught as an elective subject since 1927. Before this, aspects of magical creature study were incorporated into defense against the dark arts and potions, but the growing recognition of magizoology as a distinct and valuable field warranted dedicated instruction. Imagine the Hogwarts grounds through the changing seasons, autumn leaves crunching underfoot as students approach their first lesson, winter snow creating a pristine backdrop for the study of fire-dwelling salamanders, spring bringing new creature births to observe, and summer's long days allowing for twilight sessions with nocturnal beings. The outdoor classroom has consistently provided some of the most memorable experiences in a young witch or wizard's education. The position of Care of Magical Creatures professor has attracted remarkable individuals throughout Hogwarts history. Professor Sylvanus Kettleburn, who preceded Rubeus Hagrid, was known for his daring approach to teaching, an enthusiasm that reportedly cost him several limbs throughout his tenure. His retirement, prompted by his desire to enjoy his remaining appendages, opened the door for Hagrid's appointment. Rubeus Hagrid brought to the position an unparalleled natural affinity for creatures others might find terrifying. His approach, while occasionally alarming to more cautious students, stemmed from a profound belief that understanding replaces fear. Despite the challenges he faced, Hagrid's deep connection with creatures from the gentle hippogriff to the misunderstood Thistral exemplified the core principle of Magizoology, that appreciation begins with knowledge. The practical applications of magical creature study extend far beyond academic interest. Wand makers rely on unicorn hair, dragon heartstring, and phoenix feathers. Potion masters incorporate everything from lacewing flies to bicorn horn in their brews. Even magical transportation, from owl post to hippogriff flight, depends on our ability to work collaboratively with magical creatures. Beyond these practical applications lies a deeper ethical question that has evolved alongside the field itself. What responsibilities do witches and wizards bear toward the magical creatures with whom they share their world? This question has prompted the establishment of reserves like the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary, legislation protecting vulnerable species, and ongoing debates about creature re-dots. The introduction of the ban on experimental breeding in 1965 represented a watershed moment, acknowledging that wizard intervention in natural creature development carried significant ethical implications. The creation of new creatures, once seen as a demonstration of magical prowess, came to be recognized as potentially harmful to both the creatures themselves and the ecosystems they inhabit. As our understanding of magical creatures has deepened, so too has our appreciation for their intrinsic value beyond their usefulness to wizard kind. Modern magizoologists advocate for conservation approaches that preserve natural habitats and respect creature autonomy, marking a significant departure from earlier perspectives that viewed creatures primarily as resources to be managed. The relationship between wizards and magical creatures mirrors our own growth as a society, moving from fear to fascination, from exploitation to conservation, from control to coexistence. In the gentle eyes of a unicorn or the fierce gaze of a hippogriff, wizards find reflections of their own complex relationship with magic itself. As the fire begins to burn lower and the shadows grow longer around us, consider this: in a world where magic flows through every living thing, the study of magical creatures offers us not just knowledge of external beings, but deeper insights into the nature of magic itself. Perhaps this is why the subject continues to captivate young witches and wizards, generation after generation. The gentle whisper of pages turning in fantastic beasts and where to find them, the excited murmurs of students approaching their first encounter with a magical creature, the quiet dedication of conservationists working in remote corners of the world. These are the sounds of a tradition continuing, of knowledge being preserved and expanded for future generations. As you drift toward dreams, perhaps you might wonder, what magical creature would you most wish to encounter, and what might that encounter teach you about the nature of magic that exists in all living things? Chapter 2. The security of Shell Cottage, along the windswept coast of Cornwall, where the relentless waves crash against rugged cliffs and seabirds call into the salt-laden air, stands a small, perfect cottage. Its whitewashed walls gleam in even the dimmest moonlight, and delicate shells embedded in its mortar catch the golden rays of sunset. This unassuming dwelling, known as Shell Cottage, holds secrets of protection and refuge that speak to some of the most powerful magic in the wizarding world. Tonight, as the wind howls outside our own shelter, let us explore how this modest home became one of the most secure locations during the darkest days of the Second Wizarding War. Shell Cottage came into the possession of the Weasley family when Bill Weasley, the eldest son of Arthur and Molly, married Fleur Delacour in the summer of 1997. Perched on the lonely cliffs overlooking the endless stretch of the sea, it offered the newlyweds both privacy and natural beauty, yet neither could have foreseen how vital this remote location would soon become. The cottage itself represents a fascinating blend of traditional wizarding architecture and seaside vernacular design. Imagine approaching along the narrow path from the beach, the whitewashed stone walls rising before you, windows gleaming with a warm, welcoming light. Unlike the precarious, magical construction of the burrow, Shell Cottage was built with more conventional methods, though magic certainly assisted in its creation and maintenance. Small shells and smooth pebbles collected from the beach below were pressed into the mortar between stones, creating patterns that catch the light in mesmerizing ways. These weren't merely decorative choices. Many wizarding homes incorporate elements from their surroundings to strengthen their connection to the local magic. The shells, having spent years absorbing the powerful natural magic of the sea, subtly reinforced the cottage's magical foundations. The gardens surrounding the cottage required considerable magical intervention to thrive in the harsh coastal environment. Wind-resistant charms protected delicate plants from salt spray, while specialized warming spells created microclimates for herbs that would otherwise wither in the cool maritime air. A small vegetable patch provided fresh produce, essential during times when venturing to village shops might have exposed the residents to danger. As the Second Wizarding War intensified, Bill and Fleur transformed their peaceful home into a fortress of protection. The primary defensive enchantment placed upon Shell Cottage was the Fidelius Charm, perhaps the most powerful concealment spell known to wizardkind. This complex piece of magic involves concealing a secret within the soul of a chosen secret keeper. In this case, Bill Weasley himself served as secret keeper, meaning that only those to whom he personally revealed the location could find the cottage. Close your eyes and imagine what it means to be hidden by the Fidelius Charm. The cottage doesn't disappear. It remains physically present, yet becomes imperceptible to anyone not privy to the secret. A Death Eater could press their face against the window and see nothing but empty cliffside. They could walk through the garden and feel nothing but coastal grasses beneath their feet. The magic doesn't distort reality so much as it selectively filters who can perceive it. Beyond the Fidelius Charm, Bill and Fleur layered numerous protective enchantments around their property. Anti-apparition jinxes prevented unauthorized magical transportation directly onto the grounds. Muggle-repelling charms ensured that hikers or beachgoers would suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere should they wander too close. Perimeter alerts would notify the occupants if anyone crossed the boundaries of their land. Consider the intricate tapestry of spells that must be maintained, each overlapping with the others, reinforcing vulnerabilities, creating a seamless shield around the property. This represented magic at its most subtle and complex, requiring not just power, but precision and constant vigilance. The interior of Shell Cottage balanced comfort with practicality. The main living area centered around a hearth where a fire was kept burning almost constantly to ward off the damp chill that pervades coastal dwellings. Fleur brought touches of her French heritage to the decor: delicate blue curtains, reminiscent of Beauxbatons, silver candlesticks passed down through generations of Delacour, and enchanted seashells that softly hummed French lullabies when touched. The kitchen, though modest in size, was equipped to feed unexpected guests at a moment's notice. Expanded cupboards held emergency supplies, and preservation charms kept ingredients fresh for extended periods. During wartime, when shopping trips could be dangerous or impossible, such preparations proved invaluable. A steep, narrow staircase led to the upper floor, where several small bedrooms provided accommodations for the couple and their guests. Each room, though simply furnished, contained emergency portkeys disguised as ordinary objects, a hairbrush, a tarnished picture frame, a chipped teacup, ready to transport occupants to another safe location if Shell Cottage itself were compromised. The cottage's significance transcended its physical attributes during the spring of 1998, when it became a refuge for several key figures in the resistance against Voldemort after the harrowing escape from Malfoy Manor. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger, Luna Lovegood, Dean Thomas, Mr. Ollivander, and Griphook the Goblin all found sanctuary within its protective boundaries. Imagine those tense days, the small cottage suddenly filled beyond capacity, its modest rooms housing some of the most wanted individuals in Wizarding Britain. The atmosphere would have been a strange blend of relief and anxiety. Relief at having escaped immediate danger, anxiety about what the future held. The sound of the sea provided a constant backdrop to whispered conversations and recovery from trauma. The cottage's location offered both strategic advantages and symbolic significance. Positioned on the boundary between land and sea, it represented a liminal space, a threshold between different states of being. Throughout magical history, such boundary places have been recognized as having unique properties, often serving as conduits for transformation or revelation. For Harry Potter, Shell Cottage indeed became a place of transition, where plans were made that would ultimately lead to Gringotts, and then to the final confrontation at Hogwarts. The decisions made within those shell-embedded walls would shape the course of wizarding history. The burial of Dobby, the house elf in the garden, marked the grounds as hallowed. Harry's act of physically digging the grave without magic was a testament to the cottage's role as a place where the magical and mundane worlds intersected meaningfully. The small headstone reading "Here lies Dobby," a free elf, established the garden as a memorial site that would be visited by future generations seeking to understand the sacrifices made during the war. After Voldemort's defeat, Shell Cottage returned to its intended purpose as the home of Bill and Fleur Weasley. While many of the most intensive protective enchantments were eventually lifted, certain fundamental safeguards remained. The experience of war had left an indelible mark on the wizarding community's approach to security. In the years that followed, Shell Cottage welcomed happier visitors, family gatherings, celebrations of birthdays and anniversaries, the patter of small feet as the next generation of Weasleys explored the tidal pools below the cliff. Yet it retained an aura of sanctuary, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there exist places of light and protection. The magical protections of Shell Cottage exemplify a fundamental principle of defensive magic, that true security comes not from a single powerful spell, but from layers of protection working in concert. Just as the cottage drew strength from its foundation stones, the shells embedded in its walls, and the magic woven around it, so too does personal security depend on multiple forms of preparation and protection. For students of defensive magic, Shell Cottage offers invaluable lessons. The combination of ancient spells like the Fidelius Charm with more modern protective enchantments demonstrates how magical knowledge builds upon itself through generations. The importance of location, isolated yet accessible by those who know the way, underscores strategic considerations beyond spellwork alone. The gentle light from Shell Cottage's windows still shines out across the dark waters, a beacon for those who know to look for it. In that light, we find illuminated one of the most profound themes in wizarding history, that our greatest strength lies not in grand castles or imposing fortresses, but in the humble places where bonds of love and loyalty create protections more powerful than any single spell. As the tide rises and falls against the shore below the cottage, consider this question: what place in your life has served as a sanctuary during difficult times, and what invisible protections, magical or otherwise, made it feel secure against the storms that raged outside? Chapter 3. The Enchantment of the Goblet of Fire. Beneath the infinite canvas of stars, ancient wizards once gathered around objects of tremendous power, their hands raised as they wove enchantments that would endure for centuries. Among these extraordinary magical artifacts, Few possess the mystique, the authority, or the sheer magical complexity of the Goblet of Fire. As moonlight filters through our windows tonight, let us trace the remarkable history of this enigmatic vessel and unravel the secrets of its powerful enchantments. The Goblet of Fire first emerges in wizarding records during the early 13th century, though magical historians believe its creation predates even this early mention. Crafted from a single block of smoothly polished wood, its unassuming appearance belies the profound magic contained within. Stand before it, and you might notice how the grain of the wood seems to shift subtly in the light, how the blue-white flames that fill it during activation cast shadows that move independently of the fire's dance. The creation of such a powerful magical object was no simple feat. Wand makers and magical artificers know that the most powerful enchanted items require exceptional base materials. Legend suggests that the wood used to carve the goblet came from an ancient oak that grew at a magical nexus, a place where ley lines crossed beneath the earth, infusing the tree with raw magical energy over centuries of growth. The actual carving of the goblet likely took place over many months, each cut made with precision during specific astronomical alignments. Imagine the dedication of those early crafts wizards, working by wandlight in the deep hours of night, when certain stars reached their zenith, or pausing for weeks until the proper lunar phase returned. Such patience seems almost foreign to our modern sensibilities, but the magic woven during those careful moments of creation has endured for nearly a millennium. The primary enchantment of the goblet, its ability to select champions for the Triwizard Tournament, represents some of the most sophisticated binding magic known to the wizarding world. Unlike the crude compulsion of an imperious curse or the rigid parameters of an unbreakable vow, the goblet's selection process integrates elements of divination, assessment, and contractual magic into a seamless whole. When activated for the tournament, the goblet's wooden surface transforms, emanating a blue-white flame that neither burns its container nor requires fuel to sustain it. This eternal flame represents one of the goblet's most visually striking enchantments, a demonstration of the principle that truly masterful magic often defies the conventional limitations of its base elements. Wood that does not burn, fire that does not consume, contrasts that speak to the sophisticated spellwork woven into every fiber of the artifact. Close your eyes and imagine standing before the goblet during the selection ceremony. The great hall darkened, the flame casting an ethereal blue glow across hundreds of upturned faces, the palpable tension as the fire suddenly flares crimson and a charred piece of parchment flutters upward. This moment of transformation, from receptacle to judge, from passive to active magic, demonstrates how the goblet shifts between magical states. The selection process itself remains somewhat mysterious, even to those who have studied the goblet extensively. What criteria does it use to determine the worthiest champion from each school? The traditional understanding suggests that the goblet weighs a complex array of factors, magical ability certainly, but also courage, resourcefulness, determination, and perhaps an ineffable quality that makes one suitable for the challenges ahead. Scholars of magical theory have proposed that the goblet may contain elements of sentience, not consciousness in the human sense, but an ability to evaluate and judge that goes beyond simple mechanical parameters. This represents some of the most advanced object enchantment possible, creating an artifact that can make nuanced assessments rather than following rigid guidelines. Perhaps most remarkable is the goblet's ability to create what amounts to a magically binding contract. Once chosen, champions find themselves obligated to compete. This is not simply social pressure or conventional expectation. The magic of the goblet creates consequences for those who might attempt to withdraw. The nature of these consequences has never been precisely documented, but magical historians believe they might range from loss of magical ability to more severe personal repercussions. This binding aspect reveals the serious nature with which early tournament organizers approached the competition. In an age when magical education lacked standardization and the potential for catastrophic magical accidents was higher, ensuring that only those truly committed to the tournament would participate was a matter of safety as much as ceremony. The goblet's magic appears to operate independently once activated, a remarkable feature considering the complexity of its task. Modern enchanted objects typically require regular magical maintenance or renewal of their spells, yet the goblet seems to sustain its enchantments through centuries of dormancy between tournaments. Some magical researchers speculate that it may draw ambient magical energy from its surroundings, a rare capability that would explain its enduring power. The protective enchantments placed upon the goblet have evolved over time. In its earliest days, tradition and respect for magical artifacts provided sufficient security. Few would have dared to tamper with such a powerful object. As the wizarding world grew more complex, additional safeguards became necessary. By the time of the 1994 tournament at Hogwarts, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore found it prudent to add an age line around the goblet, a relatively simple but effective defense against underage students attempting to submit their names. But these additional protections proved insufficient against a determined and skilled dark wizard, speaks not to any weakness in the goblet itself, but to the eternal magical arms race between protection and circumvention. Even the most powerful magical safeguards can be undone by sufficiently knowledgeable opposition, a humbling reminder for security-minded wizards. The goblet's enchantment to produce a certain number of champions, traditionally one from each participating school, demonstrates its adaptability within parameters. This aspect of its magic was exploited during the 1994 tournament, when it was confounded into recognizing a fourth, non-existent school, thus allowing the selection of a fourth champion. That the goblet could be deceived in this specific way reveals something about its underlying enchantments. They operate based on the information provided rather than some omniscient understanding of the world. Despite this vulnerability, the goblet has shown remarkable resilience over centuries. It has survived wars, magical accidents, and the rise and fall of numerous wizarding governments. Such durability suggests protective enchantments beyond the merely physical, spells that preserve it against damage, aging, and even against certain types of magical tampering. The blue-white flames that fill the goblet during its active phase represent a particular magical curiosity. Unlike conventional fire, these flames emit light but minimal heat. They cannot be extinguished by water or suffocation, nor can they be scooped out or transferred to another vessel. They exist in a state that defies categorization as either elemental or illusory, a perfect symbolic representation of the Triwizard Tournament itself, which blends concrete challenges with matters of honor and perception. When dormant between tournaments, the goblet appears relatively ordinary, a well-crafted but unexceptional wooden cup. This state of magical dormancy requires its own sophisticated enchantment. The ability to effectively sleep for years or decades, then reawaken with all magical functions intact, represents advanced spellwork that wizard artificers still struggle to replicate in modern enchanted objects. The transportation of the goblet between tournaments has always been treated with exceptional care. Historical records describe elaborate processions, with the artifact housed in cushioned, warded cases and attended by guards. In more recent centuries, as magical transportation methods evolved, special accommodations were made to ensure the goblet's safe passage. During its journey to Hogwarts in 1994, it traveled in a specially designed case that protected it both physically and magically. The legacy of the goblet extends beyond its practical function. It has become a symbol of international magical cooperation, a tangible connection to wizarding history, and a reminder of both the wonders and dangers of ancient magic. Students who witnessed its blue flames at Hogwarts would later tell their children about standing in its glow, creating an oral tradition that supplements written records. The Goblet of Fire stands as testimony to what wizards and witches can achieve when they push the boundaries of magical craft. Its enduring enchantments have outlasted its creators by centuries, continuing to fulfill their intended purpose long after the hands that carved it turned to dust. In this sense, it represents one of the most profound aspects of magic, its ability to preserve intention and purpose across generations. As our exploration of the goblet's enchantments draws to a close, the blue flames seem to dim in our imagination, returning to dormancy until called upon once more. Yet the questions it raises about the nature of magical objects, about judgment and binding contracts, about the wisdom of our magical ancestors, these continue to flicker in our minds. As you drift toward dreams, perhaps consider this: if you were to place your name in the goblet of fire, what hidden qualities might it perceive in you that would inform its judgment, and what might its ancient magic reveal about the true nature of worthiness? Chapter 4. The Prophecy That Changed Everything. Words hold power in the wizarding world. Incantations shape reality. Names can be feared so deeply they remain unspoken, and occasionally, in rare and mysterious moments, words can foretell a future that has not yet come to pass. On a cold winter's night like this one, when the wind whispers secrets around the eaves, let us turn our attention to perhaps the most consequential prophecy in recent wizarding history, the one that irrevocably linked the fates of Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort. Prophecies have always occupied an uneasy position in magical study. Unlike the precise movements of charms or the measurable effects of transfiguration, divination exists in the uncertain realm between concrete magic and the unfathomable mysteries of fate. Most prophecies amount to little, vague predictions that could apply to countless situations, or cryptic warnings that make sense only after events have already unfolded. But sometimes, rarely, a true prophecy emerges, words spoken in a trance by a genuine seer, words that ripple through time and shape the course of events to come. The prophecy that would alter the wizarding world forever was spoken on a cold, wet night in the winter of 1980, in a small, shabby room above the Hog's Head Inn in Hogsmeade Village. The setting itself seems incongruous for such a momentous event, a dusty room in a pub known more for its questionable clientele than for historical significance. Yet magic often manifests in the most unexpected places. Sybil Trelawney, great-great-granddaughter of the celebrated seer Cassandra Trelawney, had arranged to meet Albus Dumbledore that evening to interview for the position of divination professor at Hogwarts. By her own account, she had demonstrated a reasonable knowledge of the field, but Dumbledore, who considered divination one of the less precise branches of magic, was preparing to politely decline her application. What happened next would change the course of wizarding history. Imagine that small room above the pub, the rain pattering against the windows, the distant murmur of voices from the bar below, the disappointed slump of Trelawney's shoulders as she sensed the interview drawing to an unsuccessful close. Then, suddenly, her posture stiffened, her eyes rolled back. Her voice transformed from its usual misty tones to a harsh, hoarse croak that seemed to emerge, not from her throat, but from somewhere far deeper. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. But he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies. In that moment, with those words, countless fates were sealed. The prophecy described a child who would be born at the end of July, to parents who had defied Lord Voldemort 3 times, who would possess power unknown to the Dark Lord, and who would enter into a relationship with Voldemort, where one would ultimately have to kill the other. What makes this prophecy particularly fascinating is not just its content, but the manner in which it came to influence events. Had it remained unheard, merely words spoken in an empty room, perhaps history would have unfolded differently. But prophecies, like all magic, exist in relationship to those who witness them. And this prophecy was witnessed, partially, by a young man named Severus Snape, who was at that time a Death Eater loyal to Lord Voldemort. Discovered eavesdropping outside the door, Snape was ejected from the Hog's Head before hearing the prophecy in its entirety. He carried what he had heard directly to Voldemort, setting in motion a chain of events that would shape the next 2 decades of wizarding history. The prophecy itself contained certain ambiguities. Most significantly, it did not name the child to whom it referred. Its description, born as July ends, to parents who had thrice defied Voldemort, could have applied to two infants born at that time, Harry Potter and Neville Longbottom. Both boys were born at the end of July in 1980. Both sets of parents, James and Lily Potter, and Frank and Alice Longbottom, had defied Voldemort 3 times through their work in the Order of the Phoenix. In the quiet hours of reflection, one must wonder how differently events might have unfolded had Voldemort interpreted the prophecy differently, for it was his choice, his decision to target the Potter family rather than the Longbottoms, that fulfilled the next condition of the prophecy, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. In choosing Harry, in leaving that lightning scar upon the infant's forehead, this represents one of the most profound ironies in wizarding history. By attempting to prevent the prophecy's fulfillment, Voldemort ensured it. The Department of Mysteries in the Ministry of Magic maintains a Hall of Prophecy where records of prophecies are stored for study and safekeeping. Each prophecy is contained in a small glass sphere, labeled with the names of the seer who spoke it and those to whom it refers. These prophecy records can only be retrieved by those about whom the prophecies were made, a security measure that reflects the potentially dangerous power of foreknowledge. The record of the prophecy concerning Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort remained in the hall for many years, a small glass orb on a dusty shelf, until the events of 1996 when it was destroyed during a confrontation between Dumbledore's army and Death Eaters. Its physical destruction, however, did not diminish its continuing influence on events. One of the most thought-provoking aspects of this prophecy is the philosophical question it raises about free will and determinism. Did Harry and Voldemort act as they did because the prophecy predicted it, or did the prophecy merely foresee choices they would have made regardless? As Dumbledore explained to Harry, the prophecy does not mean you have to do anything, but the prophecy caused Lord Voldemort to mark you as his equal. In other words, you are free to choose your way, quite free to turn your back on the prophecy. This perspective suggests that prophecies may describe potential futures rather than inevitable ones, that they acquire power primarily through the choices made by those who hear and believe them. Voldemort, by acting on the prophecy, created the very adversary who would ultimately defeat him. Another fascinating element of the prophecy is its reference to power the Dark Lord knows not. Much debate has centered on the nature of this power. Was it love, as Dumbledore suggested, the protective magic created by Lily Potter's sacrifice, and Harry's own capacity for love, despite his difficult childhood? Was it the unique connection between Harry and Voldemort, created when the latter transferred a fragment of his soul to the former? Or was it something deeper, perhaps Harry's fundamental understanding of the proper use of power, so at odds with Voldemort's insatiable hunger for dominance? The prophecy's most quoted line, "Neither can live while the other survives," has been subject to particularly intense analysis. In one sense, it simply foretold that their conflict would end in the death of one or the other. But on a deeper level, it described the intertwined nature of their existences. Harry could never truly live freely while under the shadow of Voldemort's threat. Voldemort, having identified Harry as his prophesied vanquisher, could never consider his power secure while Harry lived. This mutual exclusivity created a relationship unlike any other in wizarding history, two individuals bound by fate, magic, and eventually by fragments of the same soul, moving inexorably toward a final confrontation. The study of prophecies extends beyond specific predictions to address broader questions about the nature of time and knowledge in the magical world. If the future can be known before it occurs, what does this imply about the fixed or fluid nature of time? The existence of time-turners proves that time in the wizarding world can be manipulated to a limited extent, but prophetic knowledge suggests that certain outcomes may be, if not predetermined, then at least visible from a distance. Magical theorists have proposed various models to reconcile these apparent contradictions. Some suggest that prophecies reveal the most probable outcome based on existing conditions at the time they are made, a magical calculation of cause and effect projected forward in time. Others propose that true seers momentarily perceive all possible futures and speak of the one that appears most vividly, not necessarily the one that must occur. The Department of Mysteries contains not only the Hall of Prophecy, but also the Time Room, where research into the nature of time itself is conducted. The proximity of these two areas within the department suggests a conceptual relationship between prophecy and time that continues to intrigue magical scholars. For those who knew the full contents of the prophecy, primarily Dumbledore, until he shared it with Harry after the events at the Department of Mysteries, the knowledge presented both a burden and a guide. It influenced Dumbledore's decisions regarding Harry's protection and education, shaped his strategy against Voldemort, and ultimately informed his own momentous choices regarding the Elder Wand and his death. For Harry, learning of the prophecy at 16 marked a transition from being a participant in events beyond his understanding to becoming an active agent in fulfilling or defying what had been foretold. His gradual acceptance of his role, moving from initial shock and resistance to resolution, forms one of the most compelling aspects of his character development. Perhaps the most profound lesson of the prophecy that linked Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort lies not in its specific content, but in what it reveals about the relationship between knowledge and action, between fate and choice. In the silent spaces between its words, we find the fundamental truth that knowing what may come does not absolve us of the responsibility for how we respond to that knowledge. As the night deepens around us and the fire burns lower, we might reflect on how differently things might have unfolded had Trelawney never spoken those words, had Snape never overheard them, had Voldemort chosen to ignore them. The web of possibilities branches outward infinitely, like the delicate patterns of frost forming on our windows. Yet, in the end, beyond prophecy and magic, beyond fate and circumstance, it was the choices made by those involved that determined the outcome. Lily's choice to die protecting her son, Voldemort's choice to believe and act upon a partial prophecy, Harry's choice to walk into the Forbidden Forest, knowing what awaited him there. Even Trelawney's choice to interview for a position she seemed unlikely to receive. As you drift toward dreams, consider this question: if you learned of a prophecy concerning your own future, would you seek to fulfill it, defy it, or simply set it aside, and forge your own path regardless of what had been foretold? Chapter 5. The Ambitions of Percy Weasley. Ambition takes many forms in the wizarding world. For some, it manifests as the pursuit of glory on the Quidditch pitch. For others, it drives the quest for magical discovery or academic achievement. And for a select few, ambition lies in the corridors of power, in the careful navigation of rules and regulations, in the steady climb through the ranks of wizarding institutions. Tonight, as the candles burn low and shadows lengthen, let us explore the complex journey of one such ambitious wizard, Percy Ignatius Weasley. Born as the third son in the large and loving Weasley family, Percy's earliest years were spent in the controlled chaos of the Burrow. Imagine that ramshackle home, rooms stacked precariously upon one another, magic holding together what conventional architecture could not. Within those crooked walls, young Percy found himself positioned between two distinct groups of siblings, older brothers Bill and Charlie, already blazing their trails through Hogwarts, and younger siblings who demanded attention and created constant commotion. From his earliest days, Percy demonstrated qualities that set him apart from his siblings. Where the twins might engineer elaborate pranks and Ron might dream of adventure, Percy found satisfaction in order, in rules well followed, in achievements recognized. This temperamental difference would shape not only his Hogwarts career, but his entire approach to the wizarding world. The first significant milestone in Percy's journey came with his arrival at Hogwarts in September 1987. Picture him as he stepped off the Hogwarts Express, his robes already neatly pressed, his glasses polished to perfection, his expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. The Sorting Hat's decision to place him in Gryffindor, the same house as his parents and older brothers, seemed a foregone conclusion to those who knew the Weasley family history. Yet Percy's expression of Gryffindor traits would always be distinctive. His courage manifested not in daring exploits or physical bravery, but in the quiet determination to forge his own path, to rise above circumstances, to establish himself independently from his family's reputation and limited financial means. As the soft glow of lamplight illuminates our discussion, consider how Percy's academic performance reflected this determination. From his first year, he demonstrated exceptional aptitude across subjects, earning praise from professors and accumulating an impressive collection of achievement awards. By his 5th year, the silver prefect badge gleamed on his chest, a tangible symbol of the recognition he had long sought. The Percy, who patrolled Hogwarts corridors as a prefect, had already begun developing the somewhat pompous demeanor that his siblings often mocked. Yet beneath the self-importance and occasional rigidity lay something more vulnerable, a young man deeply anxious to prove his worth, to carve out his own identity in a family where standing out required considerable effort. His 6th year brought another milestone, 12 outstanding OWL, a remarkable academic achievement that reflected countless hours of dedicated study. One can almost see him in the Gryffindor common room, maintaining concentration amidst the chaos of exploding snap games and his twin brother's antics, his determination never wavering despite the distractions. The pinnacle of Percy's Hogwarts career came with his appointment as head boy in his 7th year. The moment when he received the badge, perhaps opening the envelope at the Burrow's kitchen table, his hands trembling slightly with anticipation, represented the fulfillment of a long-held ambition. The badge itself became almost an extension of his identity, prominently displayed and frequently mentioned, much to the amusement of Fred and George. Upon graduating from Hogwarts in 1994, Percy secured a position at the Ministry of Magic, specifically in the Department of International Magical Cooperation, under Bartemius Crouch Sr. This entry-level role as Mr. Crouch's assistant might have seemed modest to some, but for Percy, it represented the crucial first step on a carefully planned career path. Imagine Percy's first day at the ministry, navigating the bustling atrium with its peacock blue ceiling and golden symbols, his new robes purchased specifically for the occasion, perhaps stretching the family's limited budget, his stride purposeful as he made his way to his small office. The pride in his bearing would have been unmistakable. Finally, he was where he belonged, in the heart of wizarding governance. Percy threw himself into his work with characteristic intensity. His reports on cauldron thickness may have become a family joke, but they reflected his meticulous attention to detail and genuine belief in the importance of regulation and standardization. In his view, these seemingly mundane matters formed the foundation of a properly functioning wizarding society, a perspective that would increasingly distance him from his more free-spirited family members. The Tri-Wizard Tournament of 1994 to 1995 provided Percy with unexpected opportunity when Mr. Crouch's mysterious illness required him to step in as a judge. Picture him at the judge's table, back straight, expression solemn, deeply conscious of the responsibility he had been given. This moment of standing in for his superior, of being recognized as capable of such authority, surely reinforced his belief in his chosen path. Yet the tournament's conclusion brought chaos that would profoundly impact Percy's journey. The return of Lord Voldemort, the death of Cedric Diggory, and the subsequent division within the wizarding community forced everyone to choose sides. For Percy, that choice would tear him away from his family in ways that would have once seemed unimaginable. The Ministry's official position that Harry Potter and Albus Dumbledore were fabricating stories of Voldemort's return for their own purposes presented Percy with a painful dilemma. To accept their claims would mean rejecting the institution to which he had pledged his loyalty and ambition. To reject them meant standing against his family, who firmly supported Harry and Dumbledore. In this moment of crisis, Percy chose the ministry, his promotion to junior assistant to the minister himself, Cornelius Fudge, likely confirmed for him that his decision was correct. After all, It represented unprecedented advancement for someone just 1 year out of Hogwarts. The warm glow of ministerial approval, of being taken into confidence by the highest authority in Wizarding Britain, proved too powerful to resist. The confrontation that followed at the Burrow, Percy announcing his promotion and his father suggesting he had been given the position to spy on the family, escalated with the terrible swiftness of a summer storm. Harsh words were exchanged, old resentments surfaced, and Percy departed his family home, not to return for nearly 3 years. During those years of estrangement, Percy's outward circumstances continued to improve. His position gave him access to the highest levels of the ministry. His career trajectory seemed secure, and he moved into his own London apartment, a visible symbol of his independence. Yet one must wonder about the quieter moments, the evenings alone in that apartment, the holidays spent away from the cheerful chaos of the Burrow, the absence of his mother's hand-knitted Christmas sweaters. Percy's continued loyalty to the ministry, even after irrefutable evidence of Voldemort's return emerged, reveals something complex about ambition as a driving force. Having committed so completely to his chosen path, having severed ties with his family for the sake of his career, acknowledging error became increasingly difficult. Each day that passed made turning back more challenging, pride and stubborn determination preventing the reconciliation that might have brought relief. The ministry's fall to Voldemort's control in 1997 presented Percy with the ultimate test of his values. Picture him sitting at his desk, perhaps watching as colleagues were questioned about their blood status, as policies emerged that contradicted everything the ministry had ostensibly stood for. In these darkening circumstances, Percy made a choice that speaks to the core of his character. He remained at his post. Some might interpret this decision as continued misplaced loyalty or even cowardice, but another perspective suggests something more nuanced. By maintaining his position within the corrupted ministry, Percy gained access to information that could potentially help those resisting from outside. Whether he actively used this position to mitigate harm remains largely undocumented, but his eventual return to fight alongside his family suggests his moral compass remained intact, if temporarily misdirected. The moment of Percy's reconciliation with his family came during the Battle of Hogwarts in May 1998. Imagine the scene in the Room of Requirement. Percy appearing suddenly amid the preparations for battle, the room falling silent, years of hurt and anger hanging in the air between him and his family. His apology, awkward but sincere, broke that tension. Arthur and Molly's immediate embrace of their prodigal son speaks volumes about the unconditional love that had awaited his return. In the battle that followed, Percy fought alongside his family with the same determination he had once applied to his ministry career. The tragic loss of his brother Fred during the fighting added another layer to Percy's complicated journey, grief intertwined with the relief of reconciliation, the joy of return shadowed by irreplaceable loss. After Voldemort's defeat, Percy returned to the ministry, but surely as a changed man. In the reformed ministry under Minister Shacklebolt, Percy eventually rose to the position of head of the Department of Magical Transportation, an achievement that reflected both his administrative talents and the more balanced perspective he had gained through difficult experience. Percy's journey from ambitious young man to estranged son to reconciled family member offers a nuanced exploration of ambition's promises and pitfalls. His story reminds us that ambition itself is neither virtue nor vice. It is a force that can drive achievement, but must be balanced with other values to avoid becoming destructive. What makes Percy's character particularly compelling is his growth. Unlike static characters whose flaws remain unchanged, Percy learned from his mistakes. The pompous prefect who once prioritized career over family eventually discovered that advancement without connection to those who truly care for you is a hollow achievement. His marriage to Audrey and the birth of their daughters, Molly and Lucy, completed the circle of his return. One can imagine Percy at family gatherings at the Burrow in the years after the war, still occasionally prone to pontificating about regulatory matters, still somewhat more formal than his siblings, but now able to laugh at himself, to loosen his tie both literally and figuratively, to understand that his worth was never actually tied to his accomplishments or positions. As our candle burns low and this chapter of our exploration draws to a close, Percy Weasley's journey invites reflection on our own relationship with ambition. Where do we place it in our hierarchy of values? How do we balance personal achievement with connection to others? At what point might we recognize that the path we've chosen has led us away from what truly matters? As you drift toward dreams, consider this question: what would you be willing to sacrifice for your ambitions, and what would you hold on to, regardless of the opportunities that might arise from letting go? Chapter 6. The Science of Arithmancy. In the quiet hours when stars gleam brightest through lidded glass windows and the world settles into stillness, some witches and wizards turn their attention to the most elegant and mysterious branch of magical study, arithmancy. As intricate as the constellations above us, and as fundamental as the heartbeat of magic itself, this ancient discipline bridges the gap between mathematical precision and prophetic insight. Tonight, let us unravel the fascinating tapestry of arithmetic theory and practice, where numbers hold secrets beyond mere calculation. Unlike the misty uncertainties of divination or the flamboyant wandwork of charms, arithmancy operates on the fundamental principle that magic adheres to mathematical patterns that can be identified, analyzed, and potentially manipulated. Its practitioners seek to understand the numerical foundations of magic itself, the invisible equations that govern everything from spell creation to the prediction of future events. The roots of arithmancy reach back to ancient civilizations where mathematics and mysticism were inseparable companions. Babylonian astrologer priests, Egyptian temple scholars, and Greek Pythagoreans all recognized the magical significance of numbers and their relationships. In these early traditions, numbers were not merely quantities but embodiments of cosmic principles, each with its own character, influence, and magical resonance. The formal codification of arithmancy as a distinct magical discipline occurred during the medieval period, when Arabic mathematical innovations were incorporated into European magical traditions. Imagine candlelit monastic scriptoria, where wizard scholars carefully transcribed ancient texts, their quills scratching quietly as they preserved numerical formulas alongside magical theory. These early arithmancers laid the groundwork for what would eventually become one of the most challenging and rewarding subjects in magical education. At its core, arithmancy involves the application of specific numerical values to letters, names, words, or events, creating mathematical models that reveal hidden patterns and potential futures. Unlike divination, which often relies on interpretation of symbols or omens, arithmancy produces concrete numerical results, though the analysis of these results still requires considerable skill and intuition. The most fundamental arithmetic technique is numerological reduction, the process of converting letters to numbers and then reducing those numbers to a single digit that reveals core characteristics or tendencies. Each letter corresponds to a specific numerical value: A equals sign 1, B equals sign 2, C equals sign 3, and so forth, with exceptions made for certain magically significant letters that carry special values in different cultural traditions. A beginner arithmancer might practice by analyzing their own name, carefully converting each letter to its numerical equivalent, performing the appropriate calculations, and interpreting the resulting single-digit number or numbers. Even this basic exercise reveals surprising insights, as though the fundamental vibration of one's identity resonates at a frequency that can be expressed mathematically. Advanced arithmancers move beyond simple name analysis to create complex numerical models of people, events, or magical phenomena. Picture a skilled practitioner at work, parchment covered with elegant numerical arrays, specialized calculation tools at hand, eyes focused in concentration as they track the mathematical flow of magical probability. The precision required is absolute. A single misplaced digit can render an entire calculation meaningless or even dangerous. At Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Arithmancy is offered as an elective subject beginning in the third year. Professor Septima Vector, whose very name reflects numerical significance, has taught the subject for many years with a reputation for both brilliance and demanding standards. Her classroom in the Arithmancy Tower features ancient calculation devices, charts of magical number properties, and complex diagrams illustrating the numerical underpinnings of various magical phenomena. Students who select arithmancy quickly discover it requires a particular kind of mind, one comfortable with both mathematical precision and intuitive leaps. The dropout rate is notably high after the first few classes, but those who persevere often develop a deep appreciation for the subject's elegant complexity. Hermione Granger's enthusiasm for Professor Vector's classes speaks to both the intellectual challenge and the profound magical insights arithmancy offers. Consider what a typical arithmancy lesson might entail. Beginning students might focus on mastering the basic numerical correspondences and practicing simple reductions. Intermediate classes would introduce predictive calculations for determining favorable days for particular magical workings. Advanced students might engage in spell analysis, breaking down existing spells into their mathematical components to understand exactly how and why they function. The practical applications of arithmancy extend far beyond the classroom. In spell creation, arithmetic principles allow magical theorists to predict how different magical elements will interact when combined into a new incantation. Rather than relying on potentially dangerous trial and error, an arithmancer can calculate the probable effects of a new spell before it is ever cast. Imagine a small, quiet workshop where a spell creator sits surrounded by scrolls of calculations, carefully adjusting the wording of a new charm to ensure its numerical values align properly. Each potential variation must be analyzed to avoid unforeseen consequences, a process that might take months for complex spells, but ultimately produces magic that is both effective and stable. Curse breakers like Bill Weasley use arithmetic techniques to analyze the mathematical structure of ancient protective spells before attempting to dismantle them. By identifying the numerical patterns woven into a curse, they can determine its weak points and safely neutralize it without triggering potentially catastrophic consequences. In the shadowy depths of places like Gringotts' oldest vaults or Egyptian tombs, a curse breaker's arithmetic calculations can mean the difference between success and disaster. The Department of Mysteries employs arithmancers to study the mathematical properties of time, space, thought, and love, perhaps the deepest mysteries of existence. These theoretical arithmancers work with concepts so abstract and calculations so complex that few outside their specialized field can comprehend their work. Yet the insights they develop may eventually revolutionize magical understanding in the same way that Muggle theoretical physics transforms scientific paradigms. In the business world, financial arithmancers employ their skills to predict market fluctuations and optimize investment strategies. Gringotts maintains a department of these specialists who apply numerical analysis to the flow of wealth throughout the wizarding economy. Their predictions, while never perfectly accurate, provide valuable guidance for significant financial decisions affecting everything from personal vaults to international magical commerce. Even in fields seemingly distant from mathematics, arithmetic principles find application. Potion makers use numerical analysis to determine the optimal number of stirs, the precise timing of ingredient additions, and the mathematical relationships between different potion components. The most skilled brewers understand that potion making is not merely chemical but mathematical in nature, with each ingredient and process corresponding to specific numerical values that must properly balance. Throughout history, certain arithmancers have achieved particular renown for their contributions to magical theory. Bridget Wenlock, the celebrated 13th century witch, discovered the magical properties of the number 7, demonstrating through complex calculations why 7 is the most powerfully magical number. Her work, The Arithmetic Epices, remains standard reading for advanced students nearly 8 centuries later. In the 15th century, Honora Conduit developed the theory of magical resonance, which established that spells with harmonious mathematical structures produced more stable and powerful effects. Her calculations demonstrated why certain spell combinations strengthen each other, while others create interference patterns that weaken their collective potency. Modern spellcrafters still refer to conduit compatibility when designing complementary magical workings. During the Renaissance, when magical and scientific thought underwent significant transformation, Demetrius Prod revolutionized arithmancy by incorporating astronomical calculations into his predictive models. His system, known as astroarithmancy, mapped the mathematical relationships between celestial movements and magical efficacy, allowing practitioners to identify optimal times for various magical workings with unprecedented precision. The most controversial figure in arithmetic history may be Cleodna Morrigan, whose 19th century work Numerical Necrosis explored the arithmetic properties of dark magic. Her calculations suggested that certain numerical combinations inherently attract destructive magical energy, explaining why particular dark spells prove so difficult to counter. Though her research was potentially valuable for defensive purposes, many questioned the ethical implications of mapping the mathematical foundations of malevolent magic. Modern arithmancy continues to evolve through integration with other magical disciplines. Magical architecture employs arithmetic principles to ensure buildings can sustain complex enchantments over centuries. Experimental charms researchers use mathematical modeling to predict how new spells will interact with existing magical environments. Even healing magic has benefited from arithmetic insights into the numerical patterns governing magical restorative processes. The relationship between arithmancy and prophecy represents one of the discipline's most fascinating aspects. While divination often produces subjective visions requiring interpretation, arithmetic prediction generates probability matrices showing potential futures with their relative likelihood of occurrence. These predictions lack the dramatic immediacy of prophetic visions, but offer more detailed analysis of multiple possible outcomes and the factors influencing them. Imagine an arithmancer's prediction table, a complex grid showing branching timelines, each assigned numerical values representing probability weights. As new information becomes available, these values shift, with some potential futures strengthening while others fade to mathematical insignificance. Unlike prophecy, which often presents a single potential outcome, arithmetic prediction acknowledges the multiplicity of possible futures and the role of choice in determining which materializes. For all its precision, arithmancy contains certain fundamental mysteries that continue to challenge even its most accomplished practitioners. The principle of magical indeterminacy, formulated by Adalbert Waffling in the early 20th century, acknowledges that certain aspects of magic resist precise mathematical modeling. There remains an element of unpredictability that no calculation can fully capture. This principle reminds arithmancers that magic, like life itself, retains a spark of mystery beyond rational analysis. The poetic beauty of arithmancy lies in its revelation that the seemingly chaotic or random aspects of magic actually follow subtle patterns, invisible to the untrained eye but mathematically demonstrable. There is something profoundly reassuring in discovering that behind the swirling unpredictability of magical phenomena, elegant numerical structures provide a framework for understanding. As our exploration of arithmancy draws to a close, consider how this ancient discipline represents the perfect union of logic and magic, of precision and mystery, in a world where waving wands and uttering incantations produce spectacular effects. Arithmancers quietly maintain the mathematical foundations that make those effects possible and predictable. The flickering candlelight grows dimmer now, casting soft shadows across imagined pages of calculations and numerical charts. The complex beauty of arithmancy remains with us, a reminder that magic, for all its wonder and spontaneity, adheres to patterns as elegant as those found in the natural world. As you drift toward dreams, perhaps ponder this question: if a single number could represent the essence of your magical nature, revealing your strengths, challenges, and potential, what revelations might this arithmetic insight offer about the path your own magic could follow? Chapter 7. The Protection of Number 12 Grimmauld Place. In the heart of London, between the elegant townhouses of numbers 11 and 13, lies a secret that most Muggles will never perceive. Their eyes slide seamlessly from one address to the next, never registering the absence of number 12, a magical anomaly hidden in plain sight. As twilight descends on the city and street lamps cast their golden glow on cobblestones, let us explore the extraordinary protective enchantments that conceal one of the most secure locations in Wizarding Britain. Number 12, Grimmauld Place. The ancestral home of the noble and most ancient House of Black stands as a testament to generations of powerful magic and paranoia. Long before it became headquarters to the Order of the Phoenix, this imposing townhouse accumulated layers of protective enchantments, each generation of the Black family adding their own safeguards against enemies both real and imagined. The most fundamental protection of Grimmauld Place is its unplottability, a complex enchantment that prevents the location from appearing on any map, magical or otherwise. This ancient spell, likely cast when the house was first built in the late 18th century, ensures that no cartographer, however skilled, could accurately document its existence. The magic doesn't erase awareness of the building for those who already know of it, but rather makes it impossible to translate that knowledge into geographical documentation. Imagine the intricate spellwork required, magic that selectively interferes with the very process of map-making, that creates a persistent blind spot in any attempt to record the area. The spell must continually adapt to new mapping technologies, from hand-drawn parchments to modern Muggle satellite imaging, maintaining its effectiveness across centuries of cartographic evolution. Beyond unplottability, Grimmauld Place employs a subtle but powerful form of Muggle-repelling charm. Unlike the obvious effects of standard repelling charms, which might cause Muggles to suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere, the enchantment on Grimmauld Place operates with exceptional subtlety. It doesn't actively repel Muggles, so much as it renders the space between numbers 11 and 13 unremarkable, not even worth noticing. Muggles walking along the street experience no confusion or discomfort. Their perception simply edits out what their minds cannot comprehend. Their eyes move from number 11 to 13 without registering any gap, their thoughts never questioning the missing number. This seamless self-deception represents some of the most elegant charm work in Britain, magic that doesn't force the mind away, but rather works with natural perceptual tendencies to create a blind spot. The physical concealment of the house itself involves magic more complex than simple invisibility. Number 12 exists in a state of magical compression when not in use by those who know of its presence. The narrow gap between the neighboring houses holds the potential space where number 12 can expand into reality for those granted access. This spatial manipulation, somewhere between a vanishing spell and an undetectable extension charm, represents magic of extraordinary sophistication. When a witch or wizard who has been given the secret approaches, the building silently expands into the physical world, sliding into existence without disturbing the adjacent structures. The neighboring houses are gently pushed aside without their Muggle inhabitants ever noticing. No creaking floors, no rattling windows, no visible movement. This perfect integration of magical space within the Muggle world speaks to the exceptional skill of the wizards who established these protections. But even these formidable enchantments pale in comparison to the Fidelius charm that was placed upon Grimmauld Place when it became headquarters for the Order of the Phoenix. Albus Dumbledore himself served as secret keeper, a role of tremendous responsibility. The Fidelius charm represents perhaps the ultimate in magical protection, concealing knowledge rather than merely physical space. Under this charm, Grimmauld Place could not be found by anyone unless Dumbledore personally revealed the location to them. Even those who had previously visited the house, even those who had lived there for years, would find themselves unable to recall its location without the secret keeper's explicit disclosure. The magic operates not on the building itself, but on the knowledge of its existence, sequestering that information within a single soul. The complexity of the Fidelius charm becomes apparent when one considers its interactions with other forms of magic. It doesn't negate prior enchantments, but rather works alongside them, creating multiple layers of security. More fascinating still is how the charm handles the transfer of secret keeping after the original secret keeper's death. With Dumbledore's passing, everyone to whom he had revealed the secret became secret keepers themselves, simultaneously weakening and broadening the protection. Beyond these external protections, Grimmauld Place contained numerous internal security measures added by generations of the Black family. The front door could only be opened by a witch or wizard using a wand. No simple Alohomora would suffice. The lock required specific magical recognition. This served as a first line of defense against any magical intruder who somehow overcame the exterior protections. Once inside, visitors encountered additional safeguards. The umbrella stand, crafted from a troll's leg, was more than a macabre decoration. It contained subtle detection spells that assessed whether those who entered were of Black family blood. While not preventing entry by others, it would alert the house to the presence of outsiders, triggering heightened vigilance from other protective enchantments. The portrait of Walburga Black, though seemingly just a disagreeable reminder of the family's prejudiced history, served an important security function. Her screaming tirades at the presence of blood traitors, mudbloods, and half-breeds effectively announced any intrusion to the household, making silent infiltration impossible. What appeared to be merely an unpleasant magical portrait was, in fact, an early warning system disguised as familial unpleasantness. Throughout the house, ordinary objects concealed extraordinary protective enchantments. The serpent-shaped door handles could identify unauthorized touch. The heavy curtains were resistant to most revealing spells, and even the gas lamps were enchanted to burn with a light that made disillusionment charms less effective within their glow. Every aspect of the home's design integrated security with the Black family's affinity for serpentine motifs and dark aesthetics. One of the most ingenious security features of Grimmauld Place was its manipulation of magical space. The house contained rooms that could rearrange themselves under certain conditions, corridors that extended farther than the physical dimensions of the townhouse should allow, and staircases that could redirect intruders into endless loops. Like Hogwarts on a smaller scale, the interior space didn't conform to ordinary physical limitations. Particularly clever was the enchantment that activated upon the death of the master of the house. When Sirius Black died, Grimmauld Place sealed itself completely, rejecting all attempts at entry until the matter of inheritance could be magically resolved. This automatic lockdown protected family secrets and possessions during vulnerable transition periods, ensuring that only the rightful heir could claim the property and its contents. The protection of magical objects within Grimmauld Place added another layer of security. The glass-fronted cabinets in the drawing room, for instance, contained dark artifacts protected by curses that would activate if the items were touched by unauthorized hands. These nested protections, a secured house containing secured cabinets containing secured objects, created a formidable defense in depth. Against this backdrop of extensive magical protection, the house elf creature represented both a vulnerability and an additional safeguard. House elves possess their own powerful magic, unhindered by many of the enchantments that affect wizards. Creature could apparate within the house despite anti-apparition jinxes, and could potentially circumvent certain protective measures due to his unique bond with the Black family. This potential vulnerability was balanced by Creature's fanatical loyalty to the Black family tradition and his intimate knowledge of the house's secrets. He served as both caretaker and guardian, maintaining the enchantments during periods when the house stood empty. His presence ensured that the various protective spells remained active and effective, preventing the gradual magical decay that affects abandoned wizard dwellings. The combination of established protective enchantments, the Fidelius charm, and the general air of neglect made Grimmauld Place nearly impenetrable to those without explicit permission to enter. Even the Ministry of Magic, with all its resources and magical expertise, failed to locate the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, despite active efforts to do so during the period when the Ministry sought to discredit Dumbledore and Harry Potter. The irony of Grimmauld Place's role as Order headquarters would not have been lost on generations of Black family members. The ancestral home of one of Britain's most prominent pure-blood families, with its motto of toujours pur, always pure, became the planning center for a resistance movement explicitly opposed to blood supremacy. The very walls that had been enchanted to preserve pure-blood isolation became witness to planning sessions for wizarding integration and equality. This repurposing of protective enchantments highlights an important magical principle. Most spells are neither inherently good nor evil, but rather reflect the intentions of those who cast and maintain them. The same unplottable enchantment that once hid a pure-blood sanctuary later protected those fighting against pure-blood supremacy. The magic remained constant while its purpose transformed. After the Second Wizarding War, Grimmauld Place remained in Harry Potter's possession, its formidable protections now serving new purposes. The lingering enchantments provided Harry with a secure private residence, free from the unwanted attention his fame often attracted. While many of the more hostile protective elements were surely removed or modified, the fundamental concealment spells likely remained, offering valuable privacy. The subsequent fate of Grimmauld Place reveals much about Harry's character and values. Rather than simply accepting the protective benefits of his inherited property, he embarked on a project of magical renovation, preserving the useful security enchantments while removing the darker aspects of the house's magical imprint. This selective approach to magical protection, maintaining security without paranoia or prejudice, reflects the balanced perspective that emerged from his experiences during the war. Among wizard dwellings, Grimmauld Place remains exceptional for the comprehensiveness of its protective enchantments. While other locations may exceed it in individual aspects, Gringotts in the strength of its magical barriers, Hogwarts in the complexity of its spatial manipulation, few places combine so many different types of protection in such seamless integration. For students of defensive magic, Grimmauld Place offers invaluable lessons in layered protection. Rather than relying on a single powerful enchantment, the house demonstrates how multiple complementary spells can create security far greater than the sum of their parts. This principle of magical redundancy, ensuring that the failure of any single protection doesn't compromise overall security, represents sophisticated magical thinking that extends beyond mere power to strategic implementation. As our exploration of Grimmauld Place draws to a close, imagine standing before numbers 11 and 13, the evening growing darker around you. Unless you have been given the secret, your eyes would see nothing unusual in the unbroken row of townhouses. You might feel a slight magical resonance, a whisper of power that raises the hair on your arms, but the location itself would remain imperceptible, a testament to the enduring effectiveness of protections cast generations ago. As the street lamps flicker and the city settles into night, consider this question: if you could design your own magically protected space, which elements would you prioritize? Invisibility, unplottability, or the Fidelius charm? And what might your choice reveal about what you value most? Privacy, security, or trust? Chapter 8. The properties of a time turner. Time, that most mysterious and unyielding force, flows constantly forward for all living creatures, an unbroken river that carries us from moment to moment without pause or deviation. Yet within the deepest chambers of the Department of Mysteries, wizard researchers have long studied artifacts that defy this most fundamental constraint. As midnight approaches and the world grows still around us, let us turn our attention to one of the rarest and most carefully regulated magical devices ever created, the time turner. Delicate golden instruments no larger than a pocket watch, time turners represent the pinnacle of temporal magic, the culmination of centuries of theoretical research and practical experimentation. Each one consists of a small hourglass encased within spinning rings, the entire mechanism suspended on a fine golden chain meant to be worn around the neck. Their unassuming appearance belies their extraordinary capabilities, for within these modest devices lies the power to send the wearer backward through time itself. The creation of the first time-turner is attributed to Eloise Mintumble, an unspeakable who worked in the Department of Mysteries during the early 19th century. After decades studying temporal theory, Mintumble developed the first prototype in 1827, a considerably larger and less refined version of the instruments we recognize today. This early model allowed for travel of only a few minutes into the past and required elaborate preparation before each use. Over subsequent decades, time-turners were gradually refined, becoming smaller, more reliable, and capable of transporting users further into the past. By the late 20th century, the standard ministry-approved models permitted travel up to 5 hours backward, though experimental versions with greater ranges existed under strict security within the Department of Mysteries. The magic that enables time-turners to function draws upon some of the most complex principles in magical theory. Unlike simple charms or transfigurations, temporal magic interacts with the fundamental fabric of reality itself. The time-turner creates what magical theorists call a closed temporal loop, a carefully controlled paradox in which the user physically returns to a point in their own past while maintaining their consciousness and memories from their personal future. Imagine the intricate spellwork involved, enchantments that must precisely calculate the temporal displacement, spells that protect the traveler's physical form during the journey, and the core magic that tears a controlled opening in the temporal continuum itself. The hourglass at the center of each time-turner contains specially prepared sand from the primordial beaches, where time and space first manifested in our universe. Sand that retains a unique magical resonance with the temporal dimension. The spinning rings surrounding the hourglass are inscribed with astronomical symbols and arithmetic equations of extraordinary complexity. These markings serve both decorative and functional purposes, helping to calibrate the device's temporal calculations based on the Earth's rotation, the solar and lunar cycles, and other cosmic influences that affect the flow of time. When activated, these rings spin autonomously, aligning themselves according to the precise temporal shift required. The operation of a time-turner appears deceptively simple. The user turns the hourglass. One complete revolution for each hour, they wish to travel backward in time. As the final turn completes, the magic activates, surrounding the traveler in a shimmering golden light. Observers would see the time-turner user seemingly vanish, while the user experiences a sensation often described as the world rewinding around them. Colors blur, sounds play in reverse, and figures move backward in a dizzying display until the journey completes and the traveler finds themselves at their destination time. Despite this apparent simplicity, the Ministry of Magic imposed strict regulations on time-turner use, recognizing the enormous potential for catastrophic magical incidents. The primary restriction limited temporal travel to a maximum of 5 hours into the past. A boundary established after extensive research revealed that longer journeys exponentially increased the risk of severe temporal anomalies. These regulations stemmed from the cautionary tale of Eloise Mintumble herself. In 1899, Mintumble embarked on an experimental 5-day journey to the year 1402, using an advanced prototype time-turner. The consequences were disastrous. Upon her return, which required a dedicated team of unspeakables to facilitate, she had aged 5 centuries in biological terms and died within hours from temporal shock. Beyond the personal tragedy, Mintumble's experience caused widespread temporal disturbances. 25 people related to individuals she had encountered in the past were unborn, simply ceasing to exist, as their timelines were altered. Tuesday following her return lasted 2.5 days, while Thursday was compressed into 4 hours. These ripple effects took several weeks to stabilize, cementing the ministry's conviction that extended time travel was fundamentally unsafe. The magical principles governing time-turner use include several crucial limitations that help prevent catastrophic temporal paradoxes. First and foremost is the principle of consistency. Events that have already been experienced cannot be changed, even by time travelers with knowledge of the outcome. This creates what magical theorists call predestination loops, where actions taken by time travelers have already been incorporated into the timeline they experienced. Consider the events witnessed at Hogwarts in 1994, when Hermione Granger and Harry Potter used a time turner to save both Buckbeak the Hippogriff and Sirius Black. Their intervention didn't change established events, but rather revealed the complete picture of what had already occurred. The rock that mysteriously hit the water jar, the unexplained howl that distracted the werewolf. These were not changed outcomes, but rather actions taken by their future selves that had always been part of the timeline. This consistency principle represents one of the most profound aspects of temporal magic. The universe resists changes to established events with a force proportional to the significance of the potential alteration. Small adjustments might manifest as unlikely coincidences or minor accidents that preserve the original outcome, while attempts to make major changes often result in catastrophic magical backlash against the time traveler themselves. The second limitation concerns the traveler's physical presence. Unlike some fictional portrayals of time travel in Muggle literature, wizarding temporal displacement involves the physical transportation of the traveler's entire body to an earlier point. This means that two identical versions of the same person exist simultaneously during the period of overlap, the original person living through events for the first time, and their future self who has traveled back. This physical reality creates practical complications that further restrict time turner use. The traveler must avoid being seen by their past self to prevent psychological shock and potential magical instability. They must also avoid occupying exactly the same space as their past self, as two instances of the same matter cannot exist in the same location. Most critically, they must avoid revealing future knowledge to their past self or others, as this risks creating unstable temporal paradoxes. The Ministry's regulation of time turners extended beyond limiting their temporal range. Access to these devices was strictly controlled, with each one meticulously tracked and accounted for. The standard procedure required potential users to submit detailed applications specifying exactly when and why they needed temporal displacement, with approval granted only for purposes deemed sufficiently important and low risk. One of the few exceptions to these stringent regulations involved the use of time turners for educational purposes. In rare cases, exceptional students at Hogwarts were permitted to use ministry-approved time turners to attend overlapping classes, allowing them to pursue more subjects than would normally fit into a standard schedule. Even in these cases, students received extensive counseling regarding the limitations and dangers of temporal magic, along with clear guidelines about maintaining secrecy. Hermione Granger's use of a time turner during her third year at Hogwarts represents one of the best documented cases of educational time turner application. With permission from both the Ministry and Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Granger used the device throughout the school year to attend multiple classes scheduled for the same time periods. That this privilege was granted to a 13-year-old witch speaks volumes about both her exceptional academic capabilities and the trust placed in her discretion. The physical and mental strain associated with time turner use should not be underestimated. Users frequently reported symptoms, including temporal disorientation, fatigue, and a phenomenon called echo memory, the unsettling experience of having two sets of memories for the same period of time. Granger herself abandoned the time turner at the end of the academic year, citing exhaustion and the stress of living the same hours multiple times. Beyond these known side effects, magical researchers have theorized about more subtle consequences of regular time turner use. Some evidence suggests that frequent temporal displacement may slightly desynchronize a witch or wizard from the natural flow of time, leading to experienced time passing either more quickly or more slowly than for those around them. This effect typically normalizes within a few weeks of ceasing time turner use, but represents another reason for caution. In terms of their physical construction, time turners demonstrate extraordinary magical craftsmanship. The gold used in their creation is not ordinary gold, but rather a specialized magical alloy that remains stable during temporal displacement. The hourglass contains not sand but crystallized time, a substance harvested from temporal anomalies that naturally occur in certain magical locations. The entire assembly is enchanted with preservation spells that prevent degradation across centuries of potential use. The precise number of time turners created throughout history remains unknown, but the British Ministry of Magic maintained a collection of approximately 50 devices in a special locked chamber within the Department of Mysteries. This entire collection was destroyed during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries in 1996, when a stray spell hit the cabinet containing them, creating a localized temporal storm that caused the devices to experience their entire existences simultaneously before shattering. This destruction effectively ended sanctioned time travel in Britain for several years. Though the theoretical knowledge for creating new time turners remained, the ministry under Minister Rufus Scrimgeour made a deliberate decision not to replace the lost devices immediately, citing both the significant resources required and the potential dangers should such powerful artifacts fall into the hands of Lord Voldemort or his followers. The philosophical implications of time turners extend far beyond their practical applications. Their very existence raises profound questions about the nature of free will in a universe where future actions can influence past events. If the outcome of temporal intervention has, in some sense, already happened before the intervention occurs, is true choice possible? Or are we all simply acting out predestined roles in a timeline that already includes our future attempts to change it? These questions have occupied magical philosophers for centuries, with the predestination paradox becoming a standard topic in advanced magical theory courses. Some theorists, like the renowned 20th century temporal philosopher Saul Croker, argue that the apparent contradiction actually reveals something fundamental about the nature of time itself, that it is not the linear progression we perceive, but rather a complex, interconnected web where cause and effect operate in multiple directions simultaneously. Other magical researchers focus on the more practical question of why time turners allow travel only into the past, never the future. The prevailing theory suggests that while the past has already occurred, and therefore exists in a magically accessible state, the future remains unformed, a realm of possibilities rather than established reality. Some experimental temporal devices have allegedly shown glimpses of potential futures, but true forward time travel remains beyond even the most advanced magical capabilities. The ethical considerations surrounding time turners are equally complex. The potential to save lives by preventing accidents or attacks must be balanced against the risk of creating catastrophic temporal instability. The ministry's restrictive policies reflect this difficult balance, acknowledging the device's potential benefits while recognizing the immense responsibility involved in manipulating time itself. In recent years, rumors have occasionally emerged of experimental time turners with expanded capabilities being developed in the Department of Mysteries. These unconfirmed reports describe devices that might overcome some traditional limitations, potentially allowing longer temporal jumps or more significant alterations to established events. Whether such devices exist and what safeguards might govern their use remains classified at the highest levels of magical security. For those who have experienced temporal displacement through a time turner, the perspective-altering effects often extend beyond the immediate practical implications. Many report a profound shift in how they perceive time itself, a deeper appreciation for its precious nature, a heightened awareness of cause and effect, and sometimes a lingering sense that time is more fluid and less absolute than most wizards and witches assume. As the night grows deeper around us, and the hands of our ordinary, non-magical clocks continue their steady forward progress, the time turner reminds us that even in a world of magical wonders, some forces remain partially beyond our control. We may bend time briefly, journey along its currents for short distances, but its essential flow continues undisturbed, carrying us all from moment to moment through the river of existence. As you drift towards sleep and dreams, perhaps consider this question. If you possessed a time turner for a single day, would you use it to gain additional hours for productivity and accomplishment, to revisit a meaningful moment you wish to experience again, or would you leave it untouched, accepting time's natural progression as one of the few universal constants that even magic cannot fully conquer? Nifr Chapter 9. The Night at Godric's Hollow. History pivots on moments, single evenings when the accumulated tensions, fears, hopes, and destinies of countless lives converge into events that forever alter what follows. In the gentle shadows of our room tonight, with autumn leaves rustling outside our window, much as they did on that fateful evening, let us turn our thoughts to perhaps the most consequential night in recent wizarding history, Halloween, 1981, when in the quiet village of Godric's Hollow, the first reign of Lord Voldemort came to its unexpected end. Godric's Hollow in late October presents a quintessential English village scene, half-timbered cottages line narrow lanes, their windows glowing with warmth against the early darkness. Ancient yew trees stand sentinel in the churchyard, their gnarled branches casting elaborate shadows across weathered gravestones. Children in Halloween costumes dash between houses, their laughter carrying on the crisp evening air. For most residents, it was simply another Halloween, but for the wizarding world, this night would become a solemn anniversary, the beginning of a new era. The village itself holds special significance in magical history as the birthplace of Godric Gryffindor, one of Hogwarts' founders. Over centuries, it had become home to several wizarding families who lived quietly alongside their Muggle neighbors, making it one of Britain's most notable half-magical communities. The Potters were relative newcomers to this ancient settlement, having moved there less than 2 years earlier under circumstances that necessitated the utmost secrecy. James and Lily Potter had gone into hiding with their infant son Harry after learning of a prophecy that placed their child in grave danger. Their modest cottage at the edge of the village had been placed under the protection of the Fidelius Charm, a complex spell that concealed their location within the soul of a designated secret keeper. Only those to whom the secret keeper willingly revealed the information could find the Potter residence. The Potter's cottage on that Halloween evening presented a scene of domestic tranquility that belied the dangerous circumstances surrounding the family. Lily had decorated for the holiday with miniature enchanted pumpkins that softly glowed different colors. James entertained baby Harry by creating small puffs of colored smoke with his wand, each one delighting the toddler who tried to catch them in his tiny fists. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the side table, family photographs lined the mantelpiece, and a cat dozed by the hearth. Ordinary details that would later take on immense poignancy. Outside, the autumn evening proceeded with its usual rhythms. Children in costumes roamed from house to house collecting sweets. Leaves skittered along cobblestone lanes, and jack-o'-lanterns grinned from windowsills. None of the Muggle residents noticed the tall, cloaked figure who appeared at the end of the lane as darkness deepened, a figure whose arrival would forever alter wizarding history. Lord Voldemort approached the Potter's cottage with singular purpose. Through the betrayal of the Potter's secret keeper, Peter Pettigrew, he had obtained the information needed to find the family that had defied him 3 times. The family, whose child had been named in a prophecy as potentially having the power to vanquish him. His wand already responsible for countless deaths, he intended to eliminate this perceived threat with the same terrible efficiency he had displayed throughout his campaign of terror. The protective enchantments around the cottage recognized Voldemort as he approached. Magical alarms, silent to ordinary ears but designed to alert the family of danger, would have activated. Yet, by the time these warnings registered, Voldemort had already reached the garden gate. With a simple movement of his wand, he unlocked the door, a mundane action that belied the horror about to unfold. Inside, James Potter recognized the threat instantly. Without his wand, carelessly left on the sofa during the peaceful family evening, he nonetheless rushed to confront the intruder, shouting to his wife, "Lily, take Harry and go. It's him. Go. Run. I'll hold him off." His final act was one of wandless, defenseless courage, standing between his family and the most feared dark wizard of the age, knowing with certainty what would follow. The flash of green light from Voldemort's killing curse illuminated the hallway for an instant before James Potter fell, his body crumpling to the floor like a marionette whose strings had been cut. In the upstairs nursery, Lily Potter heard the terrible sounds of her husband's last stand and knew what they meant. In desperation, she barricaded the door with furniture, though she surely knew such obstacles would prove futile against magical attack. With nowhere to flee and no means of apparition from within the protective enchantments, Lily made her final stand before her son's crib. As Voldemort forced open the door, she spread her arms wide, a human shield between the Dark Lord and her child. "Not Harry. Not Harry. Please, not Harry." Her pleas echoed in the small room, met only with commands to stand aside, to save herself. 3 times she was offered the chance to step away, to save her own life. 3 times she refused, remaining steadfast between her child and danger. When the killing curse struck her, she too fell. But in that moment of supreme sacrifice, she unknowingly enacted magic more powerful and more ancient than any Voldemort had mastered. Her willing sacrifice out of pure love created a protection around Harry that would prove to be Voldemort's undoing. Approaching the crib where the toddler now stood, Voldemort saw only the final obstacle to eliminating the prophesied threat. He raised his wand toward the child's forehead and cast the killing curse, the same spell that had never failed him before. But when the green light struck Harry Potter, something unprecedented occurred. The curse rebounded, striking Voldemort himself with catastrophic force. What happened in that moment remains one of the most studied magical events in history. The cottage's upper floor was largely destroyed in the magical backlash, the roof torn open to the night sky. Voldemort's physical form was obliterated, reduced to less than spirit, less than ghost. A fragment of consciousness fled into the night, wounded beyond imagination yet not entirely destroyed, and on the forehead of the crying child in the crib, a curious lightning-shaped wound appeared, a scar that would become the most famous identifying mark in the wizarding world. The magical explosion that destroyed the upper portion of the cottage was visible to Muggle residents of Godric's Hollow, though many attributed it to an unusual firework or electrical phenomenon. The few wizarding residents, however, sensed immediately that powerful dark magic had been unleashed. Within minutes, magical observers throughout Britain noted strange readings on their dark detectors and other magical monitoring devices. Not long after Voldemort's attack, another figure arrived at the scene, Rubeus Hagrid, sent by Albus Dumbledore to retrieve the child. The half-giant found the cottage in ruins, the bodies of James and Lily Potter lying where they had fallen, and baby Harry crying in his partially destroyed crib. The sight of such devastation moved even the hardened gamekeeper to tears as he gently lifted the orphaned child from the wreckage. Shortly thereafter, Sirius Black arrived on his flying motorcycle, having gone to check on Peter Pettigrew, and discovered the secret keeper missing, a realization that led him to fear the worst. The reunion of Godfather and Godson at the scene of such tragedy presented Black with a momentous choice. His instinct was to take Harry, to fulfill his role as guardian as James and Lily had intended. Yet when Hagrid explained Dumbledore's instructions that the child be brought to safety, Black yielded, even lending Hagrid his magical motorcycle for the journey. As Hagrid departed with Harry Potter, Sirius Black remained briefly among the ruins, the full horror of Pettigrew's betrayal solidifying into a determination that would lead to his confrontation with the traitor the following day, and subsequently to 12 years of wrongful imprisonment in Azkaban. The cascading consequences of this night would continue to unfold for decades. Meanwhile, throughout Britain, strange phenomena began to manifest as news of Voldemort's downfall spread through the wizarding community. Shooting stars streaked across the sky over Kent. Owls flew in broad daylight in unusual numbers, noticed even by Muggles. In various locations, wizards and witches gathered in small groups, some carelessly visible to Muggles, as they shared the extraordinary news and raised toasts to Harry Potter, the boy who lived. The Ministry of Magic worked through the night to contain these breaches of the International Statute of Secrecy, deploying obliviators to modify the memories of Muggles who had witnessed overtly magical celebrations. The improper use of Magic Office recorded more violations on November 1, 1981, than on any other single day in its history, a reflection of the overwhelming emotional response to Voldemort's downfall. At the ruins of the Potter cottage, Ministry officials arrived to secure the scene. The bodies of James and Lily Potter were respectfully removed for preparation for burial. Magical specialists examined the site, documenting the unique magical signature of what had occurred there. Evidence collection teams gathered fragments that would later be analyzed in Department of Mysteries laboratories, contributing to the theoretical understanding of how an infant had survived the unsurvivable curse. The cottage itself was not repaired, but rather preserved under magical stasis, frozen in its damaged state as a monument to what had happened there. Later, the property would be concealed from Muggle view but left visible to magical visitors, many of whom would leave messages of hope and gratitude on the garden gate over the years. The decision to maintain the cottage as a ruin, rather than restore it, reflected the understanding that this site had become sacred ground in wizarding history. In the days that followed, James and Lily Potter were laid to rest in the Godric's Hollow churchyard, their graves marked with a simple white marble headstone, bearing the inscription, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death." Their funeral was attended by those who had known them, former classmates, Order of the Phoenix members and friends, though notably absent was their son, already relocated to the care of his Muggle relatives for his own protection. As for Harry Potter himself, he slept peacefully in a basket on the doorstep of number 4, Privet Drive that night, unaware that he had just become the most famous child in the wizarding world. The lightning scar on his forehead, still fresh and raw, would become not just a connection to Voldemort, but a symbol of hope for an entire magical community, tangible evidence that even the darkest power could be defeated. The aftermath of that Halloween night would reshape wizarding society in profound ways. The immediate euphoria of Voldemort's downfall led to a period of celebration and relief. Death Eaters were hunted down and brought to justice, though some escaped punishment by claiming they had acted under the Imperious Curse. Families that had gone into hiding emerged, and the wizarding community began the slow process of rebuilding what had been damaged during Voldemort's reign of terror. Yet the apparent victory came at tremendous cost. The Potters were among the last casualties of the First Wizarding War, but their deaths left an indelible mark on those who had known them. Remus Lupin lost his closest friends in the space of 24 hours, James and Lily to Voldemort, and Sirius to Azkaban following the apparent murder of Peter Pettigrew. The survivors of the Order of the Phoenix mourned their fallen comrades, while trying to adjust to a peace that felt incomplete to those who understood the nature of Voldemort's apparent defeat. Albus Dumbledore, perhaps alone among wizardkind, recognized that the events at Godric's Hollow represented not an ending but a pause in a longer conflict. His decision to place Harry with his Muggle relatives, protected by the blood magic inadvertently created by Lily's sacrifice, reflected his understanding that Voldemort would one day return, and that the child who had survived would need every possible protection until then. The magical significance of what occurred that night continues to be studied by specialists in defensive magic and ancient protections. Lily Potter's sacrifice demonstrated the extraordinary power of love as a magical force, not in the sentimental sense often dismissed by practitioners of dark magic, but as a fundamental magical energy capable of creating protections that even the most advanced dark wizardry cannot breach. For the wizarding community at large, the cottage at Godric's Hollow became a pilgrimage site, a place where wizards and witches could connect with the moment when light triumphed over darkness, however temporarily. On anniversaries of that Halloween night, magical visitors would gather quietly in the village square, leaving flowers at the war memorial that transformed, when viewed by magical eyes, into a statue of the Potter family in happier times. For Harry Potter himself, Godric's Hollow would remain unknown to him for 16 years, a missing piece of his history, the place where his life as he might have known it ended and his journey as the boy who lived began. When he finally visited as a young man during the darkest days of the Second Wizarding War, the emotional impact of standing where his parents made their final stand provided both pain and purpose, connecting him to the sacrifice that had shaped his life. The events of that Halloween night in 1981 rippled outward through time, influencing the development of Harry Potter, the strategic planning of Albus Dumbledore, the slow restoration of Voldemort, and ultimately the final confrontation that would occur more than 16 years later. Like a stone dropped in still water, the moment created patterns that would continue to shape the wizarding world for generations. As the fire burns lower and our thoughts linger on that pivotal Halloween night, we might reflect on how single moments can alter the course of history, how individual choices made in crisis reveal the true nature of those who make them. James Potter choosing to face Voldemort wandless rather than abandon his family. Lily Potter refusing 3 times to step aside, placing herself between her child and death, and in doing so, unknowingly creating protection more powerful than any shield charm. As you drift toward dreams, perhaps consider this question: what power lies in sacrifice freely given out of love? And how might such ancient magic continue to protect us in ways we cannot see, but nonetheless shape our journey through both ordinary days and darkest nights? Chapter 10. The Entrepreneurship of Fred and George Weasley. Laughter echoes through the corridors of wizarding history, as readily as solemnity, joy as frequently as sorrow. As moonlight filters through our window and the hour grows late, let us turn our attention to 2 remarkable figures whose brilliance manifested not in scholarly achievement or battlefield heroics, but in the transformative power of magical mirth. Fred and George Weasley, whose entrepreneurial journey from schoolboy pranksters to revolutionary business wizards reshaped magical entertainment. Born on April 1st, April Fool's Day, in 1978, the twin sons of Arthur and Molly Weasley seemed destined from birth for lives intertwined with humor and mischief. Growing up in the controlled chaos of the burrow, Fred and George displayed magical talent early, though not in the conventional ways that might have delighted their academically minded mother. By age 5, they had transformed their younger brother Ron's teddy bear into a giant spider, an early indication of both their aptitude for transfiguration and their distinctive approach to entertainment. Their childhood experiments, while occasionally alarming to their parents, revealed something profound about their relationship with magic. They approached it not with reverence or academic interest, but with curiosity, creativity, and an insatiable desire to push boundaries. While other young wizards might accidentally cause magical effects when emotional, the twins deliberately tried to create novel magical outcomes, testing limits and combining effects in ways that foreshadowed their later innovations. The arrival of their Hogwarts letters in 1989 marked a significant transition. Imagine 11-year-old Fred and George boarding the Hogwarts Express, their trunks likely containing not just standard school supplies, but also prototype pranks and half-formed ideas for magical mischief. The Sorting Hat's decision to place them in Gryffindor reflected not just their family tradition, but their own particular brand of courage, the boldness to challenge rules, to experiment with potentially dangerous magic, and to face the consequences of their choices with unfailing good humor. At Hogwarts, the twins quickly established themselves as talented wizards whose academic achievements rarely reflected their actual magical abilities. Their disinterest in conventional academic success masked extraordinary aptitude in charms, transfiguration, and potions, precisely the subjects most valuable for their extracurricular creative endeavors. Professors who paid close attention might have noticed that their ostensible underperformance in class often coincided with periods of intense focus on developing new joke products. The discovery of the Marauders map during their first year represented a pivotal moment in their development as magical innovators. This remarkable enchanted object, created by an earlier generation of Hogwarts pranksters, provided not just practical benefits for avoiding detection during their escapades, but also served as proof that sophisticated magical creation was possible even for students. The map embodied exactly what they aspired to create: objects of genuine magical ingenuity disguised as simple entertainment. By their third year at Hogwarts, Fred and George had begun their first serious experiments in product development. Their earliest creations were relatively simple: sweets that caused minor transformations, noise-making charms embedded in everyday objects, and variations on traditional magical pranks. Yet even these early efforts displayed their signature approach, combining established magical principles in unexpected ways to create novel effects that were both amusing and impressively complex in their execution. Their bedroom at the Burrow transformed each summer into an unofficial workshop, filled with cauldrons bubbling mysterious concoctions, parchments covered with product designs, and occasionally the sounds of controlled explosions followed by triumphant laughter. The twins' shared vision began to coalesce around a central idea: that magical pranks and jokes could be more than trivial amusements. They could be sophisticated magical achievements in their own right. The turning point in their entrepreneurial journey came during the Triwizard Tournament of 1995, when they attempted to cross Dumbledore's age line to enter the competition. Though their aging potion failed spectacularly, the incident embodied their approach to both success and failure: innovative thinking, willingness to take risks, and the ability to laugh at themselves when things went awry. More importantly, this period marked their first serious discussions about establishing their own joke shop after leaving Hogwarts. Their business plan developed in tandem with their product line. Prototype canary creams, sweets that temporarily transformed the consumer into a large canary before they molted back to human form, represented an early success in what would become their skiving snack box line. These treats demonstrated the twins' exceptional understanding of transformation magic, creating effects that were dramatic yet temporary, amusing without being harmful. The underground testing of products on fellow Hogwarts students provided valuable feedback while establishing a market for their creations. Their approach to product development was methodical despite its seemingly chaotic appearance. Careful documentation of effects, durations, and side effects, systematic refinement based on test results, and rigorous quality control to ensure consistency. Behind the laughing facade of pranksters lay the precise minds of dedicated magical innovators. Their entrepreneurial vision received unexpected financial support following the Triwizard Tournament, when Harry Potter donated his 1,000-galleon prize to their venture. This windfall allowed them to accelerate product development and begin preparing for full-scale production. The investment represented more than just capital. It was a vote of confidence in their abilities from someone who recognized the serious magical talent underlying their comedic creations. The twins' final year at Hogwarts coincided with the oppressive educational reforms of Dolores Umbridge, whose restrictions on student activities paradoxically created ideal market conditions for their products. Skiving snack boxes, ingenious sweets that caused believable but easily reversible illnesses, allowed students to escape the increasingly unpleasant classroom environment. The twin threat of educational tedium and institutional repression drove demand for their products to unprecedented levels. Their spectacular departure from Hogwarts in the spring of 1996, flying off on their broomsticks after setting off a magnificent display of their wildfire whiz-bangs, represented both a rejection of educational conformity and a brilliant marketing coup. The incident spread their reputation throughout the student body and beyond, the dramatic exit serving as a powerful advertisement for both their products and their brand identity. With the premises at number 93 Diagon Alley secured, the twins transformed a vacant shop into what would become one of the most visually striking and commercially successful businesses in Wizarding Britain. Weasley's Wizard Wheezes opened its doors in the summer of 1996, its vibrant facade and magical window displays standing in deliberate contrast to the growing gloom. As Voldemort's influence spread throughout the wizarding world, The shop itself represented a masterclass in magical merchandising, moving beyond the cramped, dusty aesthetic common to many wizarding establishments. The twins created an environment of controlled magical chaos. Products demonstrated themselves, displays regularly erupted in sound and color, and every inch of the three-story space invited exploration and interaction. The shop didn't simply sell products. It provided an immersive experience that embodied the joy and wonder their merchandise promised. Their product lines revealed the true extent of their magical innovation. Shield hats, cloaks, and gloves, ostensibly joke items that actually provided genuine magical protection, demonstrated their ability to adapt serious defensive magic into accessible, commercially viable forms. These products proved so effective that the Ministry of Magic placed a large order for their staff, a remarkable validation of the serious magical achievement underlying their seemingly frivolous creations. The Wonder Witch line, with products like love potions and 10-second pimple vanishers, showcased their understanding of market segmentation and demographic targeting, skills rarely associated with wizarding businesses, which tended toward tradition rather than innovation. Their approach to business incorporated both magical creativity and strategic thinking, more commonly found in successful Muggle enterprises. Even their mail-order system represented a significant innovation in wizarding commerce. Traditional owl ordering typically involved individual transactions between customer and business. The twins developed a streamlined system capable of handling hundreds of orders daily, with automated packaging charms and delivery tracking that represented a genuine advancement in magical distribution methods. Perhaps most impressive was their ability to maintain this commercial success during the darkest days of the Second Wizarding War. When other businesses in Diagon Alley shuttered their windows, and many wizarding families avoided public spaces, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes continued to attract customers. The twins understood intuitively that in times of darkness, the need for light and laughter only intensifies, that their products provided not just entertainment, but a form of resistance against the encroaching gloom. This understanding extended to their product development during the war. Alongside their standard joke items, they quietly produced and distributed items with genuine protective value: decoy detonators, Peruvian instant darkness powder, and other products that could facilitate escape or distraction in dangerous situations. Without explicitly marketing these items as resistance tools, they ensured their availability to those who might need them most. Their support for Potterwatch, the clandestine radio program that provided truthful information during Voldemort's regime, further demonstrated their commitment to resistance beyond commercial interests. The twins understood that laughter itself could be an act of defiance, that joy in dark times represents a refusal to surrender to fear. Their business became a beacon of normalcy and hope when both were in desperately short supply. The cost of this commitment was high. When Fred Weasley fell during the Battle of Hogwarts in May 1998, the wizarding world lost not just a brave fighter, but one half of the most innovative magical partnership of their generation. The sound of his laughter, described by those who knew him as containing the pure essence of joy, was silenced, leaving an absence that could never be filled. For George Weasley, continuing the business they had built together represented both an immense challenge and a way to honor his twins' memory. In the months following the battle, he faced the task of moving forward without the other half of the creative partnership that had defined his life. Yet through this profound loss, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes endured, a testament to the foundation they had built together and to George's determination to preserve their shared legacy. The post-war expansion of the business included branches in Hogsmeade and other wizarding communities throughout Britain and eventually internationally. The product lines diversified beyond jokes and pranks to include magical toys, games, and eventually a successful range of children's enchanted storybooks. What began as a joke shop evolved into an entertainment empire that would influence multiple generations of young witches and wizards. The long-term impact of Fred and George's entrepreneurial vision extended beyond their specific products to influence wizarding business practices more broadly. Their approach to advertising, product development, and customer experience represented a departure from traditional wizarding commerce, introducing concepts that would gradually transform magical retail throughout Britain and beyond. Their innovative blending of serious magic with entertainment products helped bridge the artificial divide between practical and frivolous magic that had long characterized wizarding education and commerce. The twins demonstrated that creativity, humor, and serious magical achievement were not mutually exclusive, but could reinforce each other, producing innovations that would have been impossible through conventional approaches. For students of magical business history, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes represents a case study in successful innovation during adverse conditions. Launched during a period of growing conflict, flourishing despite wartime restrictions, and surviving the loss of one founder, the business demonstrated remarkable resilience alongside its creative brilliance. The twins' success challenged the traditional wizarding career paradigm that emphasized ministry positions or established professions over entrepreneurial pursuits. The scientific and magical contributions embedded within their products are often overlooked due to their humorous applications. The skiving snack boxes, for instance, required sophisticated understanding of human transfiguration, temporary charm work, and precise potion timing. Their headless hats incorporated partial disillusionment charms, modified to affect only specific body parts, a magical innovation that would later find applications in specialized healing procedures for magical injuries. Perhaps most significantly, Fred and George Weasley expanded the boundaries of what was considered possible in magical creation. By approaching serious magical challenges with playfulness and humor, they discovered solutions that had eluded more conventional researchers. Their willingness to fail spectacularly in the pursuit of innovation, exemplified by numerous workshop explosions and memorable backfiring prototypes, paradoxically led to some of their most successful creations. As the night grows deeper and our exploration draws to a close, we might reflect on the legacy of these remarkable magical entrepreneurs. In their products, their business vision, and their indomitable spirit, the Weasley twins embodied a profound truth, often forgotten in the study of serious magic, that wonder, joy, and laughter are not merely pleasant additions to the magical world, but fundamental aspects of magic itself. The lights of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes still glow brightly in Diagon Alley, a kaleidoscope of color against the night sky. Inside, new generations discover the particular magic that occurs when creativity meets courage, when innovation dances with joy. The sound of laughter still echoes through the three-story wonderland, a fitting memorial to Fred Weasley and a living testament to the continuing creativity of George. As you drift toward dreams, perhaps consider this question: what might we create when we approach magic not just with technical skill or academic knowledge, but with the boundless creativity and joyful spirit that transformed two mischievous boys into revolutionary magical innovators whose legacy continues to brighten the wizarding world? Chapter 11. The History of Magic. The past whispers to us through ancient tomes and fragmented artifacts, through stories passed down generations and traditions preserved across centuries. As our candle flickers and night deepens around us, let us journey through the vast tapestry of magical history, from its earliest manifestations in primitive human societies to the complex, structured discipline taught at Hogwarts' School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The story of magic is, in many ways, the story of wizardkind itself, a narrative of discovery, conflict, cooperation, and evolution that continues to unfold. The earliest evidence of organized magical practice dates back to prehistoric shamanic traditions, where individuals with natural magical ability served as intermediaries between their communities and the mysterious forces of nature. Cave paintings in locations from France to Australia depict robed figures wielding what modern magical historians interpret as primitive wands, surrounded by symbols now recognized as the ancient precursors to modern magical runes. These early practitioners worked primarily with elemental magic, commanding fire, influencing weather, ensuring successful hunts, and healing injuries through methods that combined intuitive magical energy with early potion making using plants and animal parts. As human civilization developed from nomadic tribes into settled agricultural societies, magical practice evolved alongside it. The great river valley civilizations, Egypt along the Nile, Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus Valley, and ancient China along the Yellow River, all developed distinct magical traditions that reflected their broader cultural values and challenges. Egyptian wizards, perhaps the most thoroughly documented of these ancient practitioners, created sophisticated magical systems centered around preservation, protection, and passage into the afterlife. Their enchanted tombs, some still confounding modern curse breakers with their ingenious protective spells, demonstrate a magical sophistication that would not be matched for millennia. The first formal schools of magical learning emerged not in Europe, but in Asia and Africa. The Temple of Thoth in Alexandria became a center for magical scholarship around 600 BCE, attracting practitioners from across the Mediterranean and North Africa. In China, the secretive mountain school of celestial magic was established during the Zhou dynasty, teaching a form of wandless magic that emphasized harmony with natural forces. In the Himalayan mountains, wizard monks developed meditative practices that enhanced their magical abilities through mental discipline, creating effects without external tools that European wizards would later achieve only with complex wandwork. Ancient Greece and Rome represented a crucial turning point in Western magical history as practitioners began systematically documenting their knowledge and developing theoretical frameworks to explain magical phenomena. The mysteries of Eleusis, ostensibly religious ceremonies, but actually gatherings of Greek wizards and witches, facilitated the exchange of magical techniques across the Mediterranean world. Roman magical innovation focused particularly on practical applications, enchanted aqueducts, magically reinforced architecture, and early examples of extension charms that created spaces larger inside than their external dimensions would suggest. The fall of the Roman Empire led to what magical historians term the fragmented period, during which organized magical knowledge in Europe became scattered and localized. Monasteries preserved some ancient magical texts alongside religious manuscripts, often without fully understanding their significance. Village witches and wizards practiced regional forms of magic, passed down through family lines, their isolation leading to highly specialized but limited magical traditions. This period saw the emergence of distinct magical communities that developed in relative isolation from one another, creating the diverse European magical traditions that would later converge and sometimes conflict. In the Islamic world, meanwhile, magical scholarship flourished during Europe's darker period. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad became a center for magical research and innovation between the 8th and 13th centuries. Islamic wizard scholars preserved and expanded upon ancient Greek and Roman magical knowledge, making significant advances in astronomical magic, alchemical processes, and the creation of self-working enchanted objects. Their systematic approach to cataloging magical plants and creatures established standards that would eventually influence Newt Scamander's modern classification system. The medieval period in Europe saw the gradual re-emergence of organized magical education, culminating in the founding of Hogwarts School around 990 CE by Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. This marked a revolutionary approach to magical education, rather than the apprenticeship model that had dominated for centuries, or the selective temple schools of earlier civilizations. Hogwarts sought to provide structured magical education to all children exhibiting magical ability in Britain and Ireland, regardless of their background or family connections. The establishment of similar schools across Europe, Beauxbatons Academy in France around 1290, Durmstrang Institute in the far north around 1294, and others less well known today, created a network of magical knowledge exchange that gradually standardized core magical practices across the continent while preserving regional specialties. The introduction of wand-based magic as the primary European methodology marked a significant divergence from many Eastern traditions that continued to emphasize wandless techniques, creating a fundamental distinction that persists in magical practice to this day. The Renaissance period brought a flowering of magical innovation and scholarship throughout Europe. As Muggle sciences developed, wizards and witches incorporated new understanding of natural principles into magical theory. The International Alchemical Conference of 1527 in Venice brought together magical practitioners from across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, establishing standards for ingredient preparation and nomenclature that remain in use in modern potion making. The development of more precisely crafted wands with standardized magical cores revolutionized spell consistency, allowing for more complex charms and transfigurations than had previously been possible. Yet this period of flourishing magical development coincided with increasing persecution of magical practitioners by Muggle authorities. The witch hunts that swept across Europe and later colonial America represented the most severe breakdown in wizard-Muggle relations in recorded history. While most genuine witches and wizards escaped execution through magical means, the flame-freezing charm rendering burning at the stake quite pleasant, like a gentle tickling sensation. The psychological impact of this persecution drove the magical community toward greater secrecy and separation from Muggle society. This growing divide culminated in the International Statute of Secrecy, enacted in 1689 and fully implemented by 1692. This landmark magical legislation represented the most significant political development in magical history, a globally coordinated effort to conceal the existence of the wizarding world from Muggle awareness. The enormous magical undertaking required to implement the statute, including what may have been the largest coordinated memory charm operation in history, demonstrated both the organizational sophistication and the defensive mindset that had developed within the international wizarding community. The establishment of the various ministries of magic throughout the 18th century created formal governance structures for magical communities that had previously operated under more informal leadership. The British Ministry of Magic, established in 1707 as a replacement for the earlier Wizards' Council, exemplified this transition to bureaucratic management of magical affairs. The creation of specialized departments, magical law enforcement, international magical cooperation, regulation and control of magical creatures, reflected the increasing complexity of wizarding society and the desire to maintain strict adherence to the Statute of Secrecy. The Industrial Revolution, which transformed Muggle society throughout the 19th century, had a more limited impact on wizarding culture, while certain magical manufacturing processes adopted elements of mass production, particularly for standardized potion ingredients, cauldrons, and basic magical tools. The inherently personalized nature of most magical items resisted industrialization. This period marked a growing technological divergence between magical and Muggle societies, as wizards maintained traditional methods, while Muggles increasingly embraced mechanization. Educational reform shaped 19th-century magical history significantly. The standardization of educational curricula across European magical schools, the establishment of examination systems like the OLLs and NEWTs, and the formalization of apprenticeship programs for specialized magical careers all date to this period. At Hogwarts, the implementation of a more structured history of magic curriculum occurred under headmistress Eupraxia Mole in 1876, who commissioned Professor Cuthbert Binns to develop a comprehensive historical program, little knowing that he would continue teaching it long after his death. The global wizarding war centered around Gellert Grindelwald in the 1940s represented a watershed moment in modern magical history. Grindelwald's vision of wizarding supremacy and his famous slogan, "For the greater good," attracted significant support among wizards frustrated by the limitations imposed by the Statute of Secrecy. His defeat by Albus Dumbledore in their legendary 1945 duel not only ended the immediate conflict, but established Dumbledore's reputation as the greatest wizard of the modern era, a status that would prove crucial during the rise of Lord Voldemort decades later. The latter half of the 20th century saw significant evolution in wizarding society's relationship with non-magical communities and magical beings. Increased advocacy for the rights of magical creatures, reforms in the treatment of house elves and goblins, though many would argue these remain insufficient, and gradual liberalization of attitudes toward Muggle-born witches and wizards reflected broader social changes. The two wizarding wars, sparked by Lord Voldemort's rise, can be understood partially as violent backlash against these progressive developments, an attempt to restore an imagined pure blood-dominated past that never truly existed as his followers envisioned it. Throughout these historical developments, the academic study of magical history evolved as a discipline in its own right. The great magical historians established methodologies for researching periods predating reliable written records, techniques for authenticating magical artifacts, and frameworks for interpreting the complex interactions between magical and Muggle historical events. Bathilda Bagshot's seminal work, A History of Magic, published in 1947, remains the definitive text on European magical history, providing context and continuity for students attempting to understand how modern magical society developed from its ancient roots. At Hogwarts, history of magic stands as one of the core subjects required for all students through their 5th year. The curriculum traces the development of magical society from ancient times through the present, with particular emphasis on goblin rebellions, giant wars, the establishment of the Statute of Secrecy, and the formation of the Ministry of Magic. While many students find Professor Binns' delivery somewhat soporific, his ghostly voice droning on without apparent awareness of his audience, the content itself reveals the complex tapestry of events, innovations, conflicts, and collaborations that shaped the wizarding world. Beyond the classroom, magical history surrounds students at Hogwarts in tangible forms. The castle itself stands as a historical artifact, its stones witnessing over 1,000 years of magical education. Portraits of previous headmasters and headmistresses provide direct connections to past eras, offering first-hand accounts, albeit somewhat personality-filtered, of historical events they witnessed. Even the house system preserves the philosophical approaches of the 4 founders, their values and visions continuing to shape student identity, nearly a millennium after their deaths. The preservation of magical history extends beyond Hogwarts through institutions like the Museum of Magical History in London, where enchanted exhibits allow visitors to experience significant historical moments through magical reconstruction. The Time Room in the Department of Mysteries houses research into the nature of time itself, including controlled studies of historical periods through carefully regulated temporal observation. The wizarding archives maintained by various ministries of magic contain records stretching back centuries, though access remains restricted for many of the most sensitive historical documents. Family histories play a particularly important role in wizarding historical awareness. Unlike Muggle society, where family records typically extend back only a few generations with any detail, many wizarding families maintain magical genealogies spanning centuries. Family grimoires pass down not just lineage information, but also magical discoveries, spell innovations, and personal accounts of historical events witnessed by ancestors. This creates a more immediate connection to the past than is typical in non-magical communities, with ancient history feeling more personally relevant to many witches and wizards. The recording of magical history itself involves techniques unavailable to Muggle historians. Pensieve technology allows for the preservation and review of memories, providing first-hand visual accounts of events hundreds of years past, assuming the memories were properly preserved. Portrait magic captures aspects of the subject's personality and knowledge, allowing limited but direct conversation with historical figures. Magical artifacts often retain imprints of significant events they witnessed, which can be extracted and interpreted by skilled magical historians using specialized revealing spells. The study of magical history serves purposes beyond mere academic interest. Understanding the successes and failures of past magical protection methods informs modern security practices. Knowledge of previous conflicts with magical beings provides context for current diplomatic relations with goblins, centaurs, and other intelligent magical communities. Awareness of how previous dark wizards rose to power helps identify concerning patterns before they culminate in new threats to magical society. Perhaps most importantly, magical history provides context for understanding the cyclical nature of tensions between tradition and progress in wizarding society. The conflict between those seeking to preserve pure-blood heritage and those advocating for greater integration with Muggle-born wizards and witches has recurred repeatedly throughout magical history, with periods of progressive reform often followed by conservative backlash. Recognizing these patterns helps contextualize modern magical politics and suggests potential paths toward more lasting resolution of these fundamental tensions. As our candle burns lower and the night grows deeper, we might reflect on how magical history continues to unfold around us. Today's events, from advancements in magical healing techniques to evolving relationships with magical creatures, from developments in international magical cooperation to shifts in educational approaches at institutions like Hogwarts, will eventually be studied by future generations of witches and wizards seeking to understand their own magical heritage. The ghosts of the past, sometimes literally, whisper through the present moments of the wizarding world. In ancestral homes where portraits observe their descendants with critical eyes, in ancient spells still used in modern classrooms, in prejudices and alliances formed generations ago that continue to shape magical society, history is not merely recorded in books, but lives actively in the daily experience of every witch and wizard. As you drift toward dreams, perhaps consider this question: how might your understanding of your own place in the world change if you could trace your personal history back not just decades but centuries, seeing your life as one thread in a vast magical tapestry stretching back to the very origins of wizardkind? Chapter 12. The Prestige of Malfoy Manor. Deep in the secluded Wiltshire countryside, where mist clings to rolling hills and ancient trees stand sentinel over secrets centuries old, rises an imposing structure that embodies the complex legacy of one of Wizarding Britain's most influential families. As our final exploration of wizarding lore, let us turn our attention to Malfoy Manor, a place of grandeur and darkness, of aristocratic heritage and shadowed deeds, whose very stones seem imbued with the complicated history of those who called it home. The original foundations of Malfoy Manor date to the early 11th century, when Armand Malfoy arrived in Britain as part of William the Conqueror's Norman invasion. Historical accounts suggest that Armand provided magical assistance to William during the conquest, likely including enchantments to aid Norman ships crossing the Channel, and possibly confusion charms deployed during the Battle of Hastings. In return for these services, William granted Armand a generous tract of land in Wiltshire, where the foundations of what would become Malfoy Manor were first laid. The earliest structure bore little resemblance to the grand manor that stands today. The original Norman keep was primarily defensive in nature, surrounded by magical protections that complemented its physical fortifications. Archaeological studies of the deeper foundations reveal evidence of early alarm wards and intruder-repelling charms that represented sophisticated protective magic for the period. These foundations still lie beneath the current structure, a literal bedrock of ancient magic that continues to influence the property's magical atmosphere. Each subsequent generation of Malfoys expanded and refined the property according to the architectural fashions of their time and their family's growing wealth and status. The central portion of the current manor dates primarily to the Elizabethan era, when Nicholas Malfoy served in a clandestine advisory role to Muggle Queen Elizabeth I, while simultaneously maintaining prominence within pure-blood circles, a complex political balancing act characteristic of the family's historical approach to power. The manor's distinctive architectural style combines elements from various periods, unified by the family's preference for imposing grandeur. Tall windows of leaded glass look out over immaculately landscaped gardens. Marble columns support high ceilings adorned with enchanted frescoes depicting scenes from wizarding history, often subtly altered to emphasize pure blood contributions. Multiple wings extend from the central structure, added by successive generations to accommodate growing collections of magical artifacts, private potions, laboratories, and elegant entertaining spaces designed to impress influential guests. Approaching the manor along its wide gravel drive, visitors first encounter the ornate wrought iron gates bearing the Malfoy coat of arms, a design featuring intertwined serpents that reflects the family's long association with Slytherin House. These gates are more than decorative. They incorporate complex recognition charms that permit entry only to those with explicit permission from the family. The gates can reportedly distinguish not only between invited and uninvited visitors, but also detect intentions, responding with varying levels of hostility to those approaching with harmful purpose. Beyond the gates, immaculate gardens stretch in formal geometric patterns, albino peacocks, a particularly extravagant touch added by Abraxas Malfoy in the early 20th century, wander freely across manicured lawns, their ghostly white plumage creating a striking contrast against the deep green of precisely trimmed hedges. These birds serve both decorative and security functions, their keen sensitivity to magical disturbances making them effective living alarm systems that alert the household to unauthorized magical activity on the grounds. The gardens themselves represent generations of careful magical cultivation. Certain sections feature rare magical plants, maintained under protective enchantments that create microclimates suitable for species that would otherwise not survive in the British countryside. Historical records indicate that several now extinct magical plant species were preserved in these gardens long after disappearing elsewhere, though whether these rare specimens still exist in the manor's collection remains a closely guarded family secret. Fountains throughout the garden feature water enchanted to flow in complex patterns, occasionally forming brief animated shapes, serpents, dragons, and other symbols associated with the family's history, before dissolving back into conventional streams. These enchantments, renewed by each generation of Malfoys, demonstrate the family's traditional excellence in certain branches of charms work, specifically those related to animation and controlled movement of elements. The manor house itself rises impressively at the end of this carefully orchestrated approach, its facade designed specifically to evoke a sense of ancient authority and unassailable permanence. Weathered stone appears impervious to time's passage, an illusion carefully maintained through preservation charms renewed during solstice rituals that date back centuries. Even the climbing roses that adorn certain walls bloom according to patterns determined by long-established enchantments, their flowering synchronized to family events and seasonal magical alignments. Crossing the threshold of Malfoy Manor means passing through multiple layers of magical protection, accumulated over centuries and continuously updated with each generation. The main entrance hall features a magically expanded space that appears larger inside than the exterior dimensions would suggest, a deliberate architectural statement about the family's magical prowess and a psychological tactic to immediately impress visitors with a sense of grandeur exceeds expectations. The interior decoration reflects both the family's immense wealth and their historical allegiances. Portraits of ancestors line wood-paneled hallways, their painted eyes following visitors with expressions ranging from haughty assessment to open disdain. These are not merely decorative. The portraits form a communication network throughout the house, allowing the painted Malfoys to relay information about visitors or intruders to other portraits and ultimately to the current family members. The drawing room, perhaps the most notorious space within the manor, following the events of the Second Wizarding War, exemplifies the dual nature of the house as both showcase and functional magical space. Crystal chandeliers illuminate a room appointed with furniture crafted by the finest magical artisans of various eras. Beneath this veneer of elegance lies a space designed for the exercise of influence and occasionally intimidation. The acoustics of the room subtly amplify the voice of anyone standing in the master's traditional position, while slightly diminishing those speaking from guest locations, a magical manipulation of sound designed to maintain conversational dominance. This drawing room witnessed some of the darkest moments of the Second Wizarding War, when it served as a meeting place for Voldemort and his Death Eaters. The elegant marble fireplace, before which generations of Malfoys had stood to welcome distinguished guests, became the backdrop for torture and murder. The ornate table where diplomatic negotiations and advantageous marriage contracts had been arranged instead held strategy sessions for attacks on Muggleborns and plans to infiltrate the Ministry of Magic. Below the main floors lies one of the manor's most notorious features, its cellars and dungeons. Originally constructed for practical purposes of storage and the securing of valuable magical items, these underground chambers were repurposed during both Wizarding Wars as detention areas for prisoners. The thick stone walls, reinforced with silencing charms and anti-escape enchantments, made them particularly effective holding cells. It was in these dungeons that Luna Lovegood, Dean Thomas, the Wandmaker Ollivander, and the Goblin Griphook were imprisoned during Voldemort's occupation of the manor. The Library of Malfoy Manor deserves particular attention for both its grandeur and its notorious contents. Housing one of the finest private collections of magical texts in Britain, its shelves contain volumes dating back to the early medieval period, including several books believed to exist nowhere else. The Malfoy collection is especially noted for its texts on ancient blood magic, complex curses, and pure-blood genealogy. Multiple ministry raids over the centuries have sought to confiscate the more dangerous texts, but family tradition holds that the true treasures of the library can be magically concealed within hidden sections that have never been discovered by outside authorities. Throughout the manor, hidden passages and secret rooms reflect the family's long-standing appreciation for privacy and discretion. Some of these were created for practical purposes, allowing family members or house elves to move through the house unseen during social events, or providing emergency escape routes during periods of political upheaval. Others concealed collections of dark artifacts or served as meeting places for clandestine gatherings. The full extent of these hidden spaces remains unknown outside the family, with each generation reportedly revealing certain secrets to their heirs, while allowing others to remain dormant until needed. The manor's existence as a magical space is maintained through complex enchantments that must be periodically renewed through specific rituals. Some of these are tied to the family bloodline, creating a magical bond between the building and its occupants that strengthens with each generation of continuous ownership. This magical legacy explains why the property responds differently to those of Malfoy blood compared to visitors or even other residents. Subtle differences in how doors open, how quickly fires light, and how responsive the house elves are to summons. The extensive grounds surrounding the manor house contain additional magical features beyond the formal gardens. A small lake to the west has been stocked with magical aquatic species for centuries, including a colony of grindylows reportedly introduced during the 18th century, and several varieties of magical water plants used in advanced potion making. The surrounding woodland, though appearing natural, has been subtly shaped by generations of magical influence, creating a buffer zone where magical detection becomes increasingly difficult as one approaches the property, a sophisticated security feature disguised as natural landscape. The social significance of Malfoy Manor extended far beyond its physical boundaries. An invitation to the manor represented one of the clearest indicators of social standing within certain circles of wizarding society. The grand balls hosted by successive generations of Malfoys served as venues where advantageous connections were made, marriages arranged, and political alliances formed. These events were particularly prominent during the 18th and 19th centuries, when the family regularly entertained ministry officials, international magical dignitaries, and the heads of other prominent pure-blood families. The guest lists for these events reflected the family's complex approach to status and influence. While maintaining their public commitment to pure-blood ideology, the Malfoys pragmatically included half-blood wizards and witches who had attained positions of significant power or influence. This selective flexibility in their social associations allowed the family to maintain networks of influence that extended beyond strictly ideological lines, contributing to their longevity as a politically relevant force despite changing social attitudes. Throughout its history, the manor served as more than a residence. It functioned as a symbol of the family's place in wizarding society. Its grandeur communicated wealth, its age conveyed heritage, its magical refinements demonstrated prowess, and its exclusivity reinforced status. For generations of Malfoys, the manor represented the physical embodiment of their family motto, Sanctimonia Vincet Semper, purity will always conquer. The irony that this symbol of pure blood supremacy was ultimately violated by the half-blood Lord Voldemort himself represents one of history's more pointed commentaries on the hollowness of blood purism. During the First Wizarding War, Malfoy Manor maintained its facade of respectable neutrality while serving as an occasional meeting place for Death Eater activities. Lucius Malfoy, following family tradition of political flexibility, managed to avoid having the property directly associated with Voldemort's activities. This careful distancing allowed the manor to emerge from the first conflict with its reputation relatively intact, its darkened rooms once again hosting ministry officials and influential wizarding families after Voldemort's first defeat. The Second Wizarding War brought a more profound transformation, as the manor became Voldemort's headquarters following Lucius Malfoy's fall from favor. The occupation fundamentally altered the manor's character and legacy. Spaces designed for elegant entertainment became scenes of torture and murder. The magical atmosphere of the house itself reportedly darkened, with even the enchanted ceilings and animated decorative elements taking on more menacing aspects. House elves whispered of bloodstains that resisted magical cleaning and shadows that moved independently of any physical source. The most notorious event during this occupation was undoubtedly the imprisonment and torture of Hermione Granger, witnessed by a captured Harry Potter and Ron Weasley. The drawing room where this occurred, the same space where generations of pure-blood children had been presented to society at coming-of-age ceremonies, became permanently marked by this act of cruelty. Magical locations absorb impressions of particularly powerful emotional events, and few emotions generate more magical resonance than the level of suffering inflicted there. Following Voldemort's defeat, Malfoy Manor faced an uncertain future. Though the Malfoy family avoided imprisonment through a combination of last-minute allegiance switching, testimony against other Death Eaters, and substantial financial contributions to post-war reconstruction, their social standing was irrevocably damaged. The manor, once a coveted invitation destination, became a symbol of collaboration with Voldemort's regime. The ministry conducted multiple thorough searches of the property, confiscating numerous dark artifacts and magical texts. The magical restoration of the manor presented unique challenges beyond ordinary cleaning and repair. Certain types of dark magic leave residual traces that resist conventional magical cleansing. Areas where particularly violent deaths occurred often retain magical impressions that manifest as cold spots, unusual shadows, or disturbing sensory phenomena. Professional curse breakers and magical cleansers reportedly worked for months to address these issues, though rumors persist that certain rooms remain unusable due to lingering magical contamination. For Draco Malfoy, inheriting the manor represented a complex burden rather than the triumph it would have been for previous generations. The property came to him stained with both literal and figurative darkness, its grand history inseparable from its recent notorious past. His decision to maintain family ownership while making significant changes to the property's appearance and magical atmosphere reflected a nuanced approach to legacy, neither abandoning his heritage entirely nor preserving its darkest elements. The most significant physical changes included the demolition of certain sections that had been most heavily contaminated by dark magic during Voldemort's occupation. The dungeons were permanently sealed with complex magical barriers. The drawing room where Hermione Granger was tortured was completely reconstructed with different proportions and architectural details to disrupt the lingering magical resonance, and portions of the gardens were replanted with species known for their properties of magical cleansing and renewal. Today, Malfoy Manor stands as a complex symbol in Wizarding Britain, a reminder of how power, prejudice, and prestige intertwine through magical history. For some, it remains emblematic of pure-blood supremacist ideology and collaboration with Voldemort. For others, particularly younger generations less directly connected to the war, it represents the complicated process through which wizarding society continues to reckon with its past, while cautiously moving toward a more inclusive future. The manor itself seems to reflect this ambiguity, its physical presence both imposing and somehow diminished. The white peacocks still wander immaculate lawns, the fountains continue their enchanted displays, and the ancient stones still whisper with centuries of accumulated magic. Yet something fundamental has changed, a subtle shift in the property's magical resonance that sensitive visitors can perceive. Whether this represents the beginning of redemption or merely a cosmetic concealment of unchanged foundations remains a question only time will answer. As our exploration of wizarding lore draws to a close and the night grows deep around us, Malfoy Manor offers a fitting final contemplation, a reminder that magical places, like the people who inhabit them, contain multitudes of contradictions. Grandeur and cruelty, beauty and darkness, heritage and burden all coexist within those ancient walls, just as they do within the broader tapestry of wizarding history. As you drift toward dreams, perhaps consider this question: how do the spaces we inhabit shape our understanding of ourselves, and how might we in turn transform those spaces through our actions, for better or worse, leaving impressions that may last long after we ourselves have departed?